Good evening. I call this meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission for November 8, 2023 to order. Stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Lori, would you please take the roll?
Chairman Richardson.
Here.
Vice Chairman Aton.
Here.
Secretary Grant.
Here.
Member Moscoso.
Here.
Member Garrod. Member Faison.
Here.
Member Perez.
Here.
Alternate Member Childs.
Here.
Alternate Member Rogers.
Here.
School Board Member Gilbert.
Here.
We do have a quorum. Next item is approval of minutes of October 18th. Y'all should have received a copy of them. Anybody want to make any changes, deletions to the minutes? Member Perez.
Motion to accept the minutes of October 18th.
Motion to approve and seconded by Member Grant. Any other discussion? Roll call, please.
Member Faison.
Yes.
Secretary Grant.
Yes.
Member Perez.
Yes.
Member Moscoso.
Yes.
Member Rogers.
Yes.
Vice Chairman Aton.
Yes.
Chairman Richardson.
Yes. Next item is item 6. Chelsea, will you go over that quasi-judicial confirmation procedures?
Yes, sir. There are two quasi-judicial items, 9A and C of the agenda this evening. The notice for the audience members is that all persons who anticipate speaking on any public hearing item must fill out an oath card to be heard on that agenda item and sign the oath contained thereon. These cards are located on the table near the entrance to the council chamber or may be obtained from the recording secretary. This meeting will be conducted in accordance to the procedures adopted in Resolution Number 24-1997. Those speaking in favor of a request will be heard first, those opposed will be heard second, and those who wish to make a public comment on the item will speak third. The applicant may make a brief rebuttal if necessary. A representative from either side, for or against, may cross-examine a witness. Anyone who speaks is considered a witness. If you have photographs, sketches, or documents that you desire for the commission to consider, they must be submitted into evidence and will be retained by the city. Please submit such exhibits to the recording secretary.
Thank you. There is no item under consent agenda, no items under old business. While I clear my voice, Eddie, it's yours, new business.
Thank you, sir. This is item 9A, beginning on page 9 of tonight's agenda. The applicant, Kim Rozenka, on behalf of James Feaster for Bin's Self-Storage Jacks LLC, is requesting a voluntary annexation and small-scale amendment with rezoning on approximately 8.93 acres for purposes of constructing a self-storage facility to include a 3-story, 110,400 square foot climate-controlled self-storage building, 123 outdoor storage spaces, and associated parking and stormwater facilities. The subject property is made up of 3 parcels in unincorporated Brevard County and is currently vacant. All 3 parcels are located west of South Street, State Road 405, and east of Interstate 95. The parcel closest to South Street, identified by parcel number 223519AV*33.01, has a future land use designation of industrial in Brevard County and is owned IU Light Industrial, also in Brevard County. The remaining 2 parcels have a future land use designation of industrial in Brevard County and are zoned IU1 Industrial Heavy in Brevard County. The intent of the request is to change all 3 parcels to the city's industrial future land use category and light industrial and warehousing M1 zoning district with concept plan. I did want to point the commission to a couple of areas within your packet. The first is the findings on page 24 of your agenda. And I'll just read the findings. The first finding, the annexation is consistent with the city's comprehensive plan in Chapter 171 of Florida statutes. Number 2, the comprehensive plan future land use small-scale map amendment is consistent with the city's comprehensive plan and the South Street small area plan. The South Street small area plan recommends the industrial future land use category on the property. Number 3, the proposed rezoning to the light industrial and warehousing M1 zoning district with concept plan is consistent with the proposed industrial future land use category, the city's comprehensive plan, and the South Street small area plan. There's also an area under this, a paragraph that's underlined. We want to emphasize this. Although the M1 is consistent with the industrial future land use category, it should be noted that the South Street small area plan identified the subject area as appropriate for heavy industrial type developments. The highest and best use on the property is heavy industrial. Rezoning properties to a heavy industrial district are generally rare and should be considered where appropriate. The additional flexibility of uses associated with a heavy industrial zoning is more compatible with the existing permitted uses in the county. The proposed M1 zoning district with concept plan will impose unnecessary restrictions on the property. Additionally, I'd like to point you all to page 106. Page 106 is a map from 105, sorry. Page 105, it's a colorful diagram of the South Street small area plan. So we included the South Street small area plan in your agenda packet tonight to compare it to the request. And I just wanted to help the commission understand what this map is representing. This is a recommended development pattern for the South Street small area. And there's a couple colors noted here. If you'll notice the magenta color, which is light industrial, mixed commercial, is found east of South Street, and the purple color industrial is found west of South Street. And so the matrix on the following page is supposed to guide for when properties that are in the county or go through a small scale map amendment are, when we're considering what designation should be considered, this matrix is to help guide future development. And so you'll find that if you look in the column labeled industrial area, so that would be the purple color on the previous page that's found west of South Street. There's a couple of zoning districts that are appropriate in this industrial area category, and that's the PID, Planned Industrial Development, M1, our light industrial, and M3, which is our highway infill industrial. And then M2 is also appropriate. So the applicant is requesting the M1 zoning district, which is consistent with this industrial area. However, we wanted to point out to the commission that a heavier industrial M2 zoning district could be permitted at this property. And if the commission were to recommend and council were to suggest to the applicant to do that, that would require a new hearings, new legal advertisements, and delaying the application further. So I just wanted to point those out. And I think that's all I wanted to point out, but I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Any questions of the staff?
I have a couple.
Member Faison was first.
Good evening. What is the least restrictive, easiest way forward for the applicant? Is it M1?
Least restrictive, so the M1 zoning district would further limit the number of uses that are permitted. The applicant is requesting the M1 because they have a proposed development that is a mini warehouse self-storage facility, and that's permitted in both the M1 and M2 zoning districts. My understanding of why the applicant has chosen the M1 is because there are smaller setbacks, and so it fits their design concept. But if you're asking what would be more limiting, the M1 would further limit the number of permitted uses on the property compared to an M2 that would allow more uses.
But those uses would be outside of the scope of what their intended use.
Yes, sir.
Okay, but the M1 fits them perfectly, and it rock solid for them.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Member Rogers, you were next.
I'll wait if somebody had another one.
Member Moscoso.
Sure. I saw that there's 161 ADT average daily trips on the segment. My question is, I think it said that the Long Ridge Transportation Plan would be to widen South Street in 2041 to 2045. So how are we monitoring future developments that are coming up so that we make sure we're not adding more trips before we have time for that road to be expanded?
Sure. So the city monitors transportation concurrency. So every time a request comes in, a concurrency assessment is conducted that evaluates the capacity of the roadway. And so there is a project from the TPO that the city has helped further to study the corridor along South Street and consider expanding the roadway. But to answer your question, the transportation concurrency is what we use to evaluate the capacity of a roadway.
And is that something that we are able to look at before we approve projects moving forward?
As far as the public records request,
No, just general knowledge. If there's another project that comes up and say, at what point do we say this is too much traffic on this street before the road gets expanded?
so if we were to conduct the concurrency assessment and find that the transportation is over capacity, then at that point, we could consider other options like a cost share analysis where the applicant would help pay for it to offset some of the features like deceleration lanes, turn lanes that could help mitigate the additional capacity.
Okay. My next question is, I noticed that there are some wetlands on the property. Would you kind of go over that with us?
Sure.
Thank you.
Do you happen to have a page number that's most helpful, or if not, I can look through real quick.
97.
97. Yeah, so page 97 of your agenda is the wetland delineation map. And so you'll see that mostly on the perimeter of the property is where the wetlands are identified, and the applicant on the concept plan, let me see which page best shows that.
Page 89.
Yes, page 89 is the environmental consideration plan, and so there are some proposed impacts to wetlands. As you can see, there's a wetland impact area 1 that shows a total of 0.3 acres of impacts, as well as in the northwest corner, a wetland 2 impact area. And so the comp plan would require that a wetland greater than 5 acres would be placed in the conservation future land use, and since we don't have a wetland greater than 5 acres, it's not required.
Thank you.
Member Rogers.
Eddie, is the heavy industrial, I'm trying to remember exactly where I saw it, but somebody was saying that it was desirable possibly to keep some heavy industrial, and somebody said, well, we had some in the south at an industrial park, and that was agreed, but is there any, at the moment, is there any, or do you foresee any shortage of heavy industrial zoning, within the city that we may regret not having later?
Industrial property is hard to come by because it's difficult to add industrial lands, to add a zoning designation to a piece of property. So the city, where possible, tries to protect industrial lands from encroachment from different land uses. And this is an opportunity, this is an area that in the small area plan was identified for industrial uses, particularly west of South Street, more of the heavier type of industrial uses. So it's a potential area that could be kept for a heavier industrial use.
And could you give a few examples? I know there were a few in there, but I don't remember exactly what they were of a heavy industrial use.
Sure, that's on page.
Boat building was one of them, I think.
Page 13
Only
of
thing
the
that's
agenda.
stuck.
It's a staff report. There's a couple listed there, such as mulching facility, fireworks sales, power substations and transmission facilities, commercial entertainment and amusement enterprises, truss manufacturing. So things that you would associate with noise or nuisances.
Okay, I see. All right. So it's currently in the county. And typically, if someone is going to hook up to our utilities, they get annexed first. Is that the way that usually works?
So if a development is interested in receiving the city's utility services, they're required to apply for annexation. The city is not required to annex. If for reasons that the property is not eligible for annexation because it doesn't meet state statute on eligibility requirements, then we could accept a utility agreement.
Oh, so that is done. There are places that are still in the county that are using our utilities. You just have some sort of agreement with them.
Yes, sir.
And
With the idea that when the property becomes eligible, because typically one of the eligibility requirements is that there's, the city limits are adjacent to that property.
yes, which is the case here.
Which is the case here, and which is why they're required to request annexation. But in cases where a utility agreement is in place, the idea is that when the property becomes consistent with state statute for annexation, then the city could move forward with annexing that property with permission from the owner with that agreement.
But there's no legal reason why the city has to annex a property.
Correct.
Okay. And to change gears slightly, but I'm coming back around again. We're going to be here maybe late tonight, who knows, regarding the Live Local Act. And I believe that Mr. Parrish told us, but it may have been you and it may have been someone else, but I think it was one of you two, that we are very close to the 20% threshold, after which we do not have the right to insist upon, in the balance between industrial and residential in this city, commercial and residential, after which we do not have the option to insist on a mixed-use development that has retail and residential. It could be just full residential. Am I correct with that?
So I think your original question was how close are we to the 20% threshold?
I wasn't specifically asking how close we are. I was just saying that we are close. And if we go over that 20% threshold, then we lose the ability to require a retail component or a commercial component to the development. Am I right?
That's my understanding.
So every square foot that we add of commercial space to the city of Titusville pushes us closer to that threshold.
The Live Local law says that 20% is the threshold, yes. We are currently, what we've estimated to be at 18% around. This property won't add much to it, won't even give us over that threshold. But if we are over that threshold, we would not be required to, a Live Local qualifying project would not be required to include a mixed-use component.
After we hit 20% or over 20%?
I believe 20%.
Right at 20%. But if we continue to add commercial properties within the city of Titusville, that is the direction we're heading in, right?
We are also processing several requests to change commercially designated property into residential. So we have lost quite a few in the past few years. Several actions have been made by recommendations by this commission and to city council's action. And we're processing a few right now. So that number will change, and I can't say which direction we're really going. So we have this one, and we also have other projects that go in the other direction, if that answers your question.
It does somewhat, but I guess I'm just saying that it's one thing to change from commercial to residential because that does not push us in the wrong direction as we understand it, that we feel like it's better to have the option to require, the mixed use. But every additional commercial that we take into it's pushing us closer to that limit.
I could tell you this property won't even come.
I understand this property is not going to push us over the limit. I'm just saying that, little by little, because the Live Local Act requires a continuous evaluation of what exactly, that percentage is.
That's correct.
Then little by little, we're inching towards that line. And furthermore, in the back of my mind is, whether there's going to be some huge legal fight over whether the airport is included in that calculation or not. And I find myself wondering whether we might want an extra 9 acres or 8 acres at some point to keep us from not having the options that we now have.
Any other questions?
Chairman,
Yes. Member Childs.
along the, I had that same question or, thought in my mind. That's why I asked Eddie earlier today what the percentage was and what the acreage was. And I think I did a calculation and it's like 165 acres is a percentage point for us right now, currently. So, I mean, I don't think we'll come close to it with that, but I totally had that same thought that you did because that's why I asked that question earlier. But along the same lines of annexation, is there any reason why? Is there any? I guess is there any drawback to not doing annexation? Is that because besides no property tax, right? So if we annex them, we have property taxes for that property, right? And is there anything else? We'll be giving them utilities and it's covered under an annexation instead of using an agreement like you said, right? But is there any reason why we shouldn't do it, I guess, or besides the live local?
One of the things that would happen in that case is if they're allowed to build this development in the county is then that they would develop to the county's development standards. And so if it ever gets annexed in the future, it would be built to a different standard than what the city has. And so it would potentially be a non-conforming structure, which you can't expand or enlarge a non-conforming structure. So there could be difficulties down the road if that happens, but the tax base is also another issue.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And Chairman, I did want to add also when the commission's done asking questions, I'm aware that the applicant has a presentation. I just want to make sure you are aware of that.
Okay. I have one more question for you. That interstate commercial at the tip of the South Street development area, it doesn't really affect this application, but the case of the red, it goes over to Foley Road. It includes Lowe's, Starbucks, the motels, the gas stations, and it includes over to Foley Road, which includes Black Cat Coffee. Am I correct?
Correct.
So, okay. Any other questions? We'll open the public hearing, and the first person we'll have speak is the applicant.
Good evening, Chairman Richardson, member of the Planning and Zoning Board. My name is Commission. You're Commission, correct? I'm Kim Rosenko with the law firm of Lacey Lyons Rosenko. I'm here on behalf of TRG and CESO. They're related companies. One's the development company, one's the engineering company, and they are the contract purchasers for this property owned by the Benz company out of Jacksonville. With me today is Garrett George. He is with CESO. Which is the engineering and architect component. He is the project manager. Also with me is John Orlando with TRG, which is the development team, and he is the director of construction. Also with me is my associate, Caitlin Lewis. TRG, as I said, is the contract purchaser for these three parcels. I do have a PowerPoint. I don't know if you have it up on your screen. I have paper copies if anyone would like it.
The PowerPoint is available on your agenda star in case you wanted to see it on your laptop.
Okay. Would you like a paper copy? Anyone like a paper copy? Yeah, but it's some of the things are hard to see. There's so if I thought these would load automatically on there. But you change your mind. I have two more copies. I knew some would want it and some wouldn't. Again, the intent is to build a three-story storage facility as described in the staff report on approximately 9 acres. That is the aerial. It's the same picture that you have in your agenda packet. So what I'll be doing is going through, talking about a little bit about the project. If you have questions, I will try to answer them, but if it's about the site plan or the environmental constraint plan, one of these gentlemen will probably answer it for you. And I have 11 by 17s in case you want to see them closer as well. So this property is in Brevard County jurisdiction, but the property needs access to Titusville water and sewer. The applicant originally was buying this, TRG was originally buying this with already entitled for a storage facility under the IU and IU1 in the Brevard County. However, they found out there was no water and sewer. They were told by the city of Titusville they had to annex. So that's why we're here, essentially. It's available to annex, so under the annexation agreement, they will have to annex if they want water and sewer. Currently, this is zoned light industrial and heavy industrial and would not need anything but a site plan and construction plans in the county. We started this project in April, and it's a complicated process, this annexation, looking at the roads and the capacities and the sewer and the water and things like that. Applications were submitted on June 7th, and we thought this hearing would be September 20th. However, along the way, we found out that State Road 405, South Street, is above capacity. There's too much traffic going on right now, and there's nothing the city can do because it's a FDOT road. So we were originally told, well, maybe you can't annex. And so we talked further, and since it's only 161 average daily trips, it's de minimis. So your traffic engineer said, no, it's really not going to impact the traffic. It's fine. They can annex, and indeed they need to annex because they need water and sewer. That's the posture we believe we're in here today. 2 weeks ago, we were asked if we would consent to upzone from M2 to M1, but the higher intensity zoning is not needed for this project, and the applicant has indeed declined that and would ask that it not be imposed on them. In your small area plan, which I'll discuss a little bit more in depth, on page 8, it appears to prohibit new M2 zonings. It says there shall be no more M2 zonings unless it's already designated as such. So that's a little confusing from my perspective. So looking now at the plan, that's the area right there. That is the site plan. As you'll see, the building is 40 foot from State Road 405, and this is obviously a concept plan. You're not voting on the site plan. It's something that will go through city staff to review. As the retention pond up front, and it is far back from the road. It does have wetlands. They have tried to avoid as many wetlands as possible, but they are indeed preserving 1.49 acres of wetland, but they are impacting about 1.4 as well. That's the conceptual site plan. We can see the buildings and the parking. They do intend to have some outdoor storage on the north there. The environmental constraint plans, that does show the wetlands, shows what's being impacted and what's being preserved. And that is the rendering of what this building will look like. Storage facilities don't look like storage facilities anymore. They look like office buildings. So they just wanted you to see that. They're proud of their products, and we have some more products to show you of what they've done in this county and in other states. As stated in your agenda packet, your future land use, in fact, future land use policy 1.8.7 requires an analysis of the surrounding uses and zonings when you're looking at applying a zoning. When you look back at the aerial, to the north of this project is Ring Power Corp, which is construction equipment sales and rentals. So even though it's industrial, it's not a heavy industrial use. When you look to due east, you have outdoor storage, which is very similar to this project. It's zoned M3, but it is indeed an M1 use. When you look to the north of that, you have 4 single-family homes in single-family residential. So this is really a mixed use. You go down to, on the east side, if you go down to the south, you have some businesses and trades. You actually have a large 32-acre agricultural use land just to the south of this property on the north. And then as you go west of State Road 405, down further, you have a large commercial piece of property. So this is a mixed use. This is not necessarily a heavy industrial use because of what's there. Your code, section 28.317, states light industrial services and manufacturing, M1. In fact, it has the stated purpose of the district as intended to provide areas for service and repair establishments, personal storage facilities, and warehousing, light manufacturing, processing, and distribution. So since we are doing personal storage facilities, this makes sense to have an M1 because this is the appropriate zoning for this use and for what the applicant intends to use it for. You also must consider the uses and zonings that are adjacent, that are in Brevard County. You still have to look at what might impact all surrounding properties, even though it's in Brevard County jurisdiction. So when you go to the zoning map of Brevard County, this is page 6, the slide number 6 in your PowerPoint. To the west is PIP. And PIP zoning is a less intense use than light industrial in the county. And that actually includes single-family residences and motels. So in that PIP, they could have single-family residences. It's vacant right now. And then if you go south and west, you have GU, which is general use, which is 1 house per 5 acres. And it allows agricultural pursuits as well. So if you put heavy industrial there, such as heavy manufacturing, you could indeed be impacting property that's in Brevard County. There's the Titusville zoning map. As I mentioned, you have M3 due east, and that is the storage facilities, which is an M1 use, which is allowed in M3, but all they need is M1 as well. You go south of that, you have M1, M1, M2, and then you have GU further to the east. You have Brevard County future land use map. This is all industrial future land use, so indeed a future land use would be consistent, industrial. Then you have the Titusville future land use map, again, also industrial, so creating this as industrial future land use would be consistent as stated by staff. I want to talk about just a little bit about M1 uses and the small area plan, the South Street small area plan that Mr. Glindo discussed briefly. M1 zoning allows less intense industrial zoning, but also allows some commercial zoning. And actually, the M1 zoning gives more opportunities for uses because you have some commercial uses that you can't have in M2 or M3. Looking at your use table 28.54, there are quite a few things that are allowed in M1 that's not allowed in M2. You can have repair services for small equipment. You can have upholstery shops and a veterinarian clinic. So there are additional uses. When you go into the M2, there are things, you also can have dry cleaners and food trucks in M1, which you can't have in M2 or M3. If you do have an M2 here, you can have heavy industrial uses, heavy manufacturing, transportation facilities, recycling, mulching, composting, production print shops that are allowed in M2 that really are not appropriate in M1 based upon what's out there. Looking at the small area plan, again on page 105 and 106 of your agenda packet, 105 does have that pretty colored map, but the purple just says industrial. It doesn't say heavy industrial. So M1 is an industrial use. This could have said heavy industrial, but it doesn't say that. As to page 106, if you look under that matrix, paragraph numbered 1, M2 shall be permitted only where the property currently has the M2 zoning district. That to me sounds like a prohibition on M2 placing that on this property. It's just the way it's stated. It's a bit awkward. Finally, if you do have M2 zoning here and these heavy industrial, heavy manufacturing, you're going to create more traffic. And we've already been told that the traffic is over capacity on this road. So there's no reason to add an M2 use that can add more traffic when it's not being upgraded to 2041, 2045. As to the request for the M1 zoning, the burden of proving the necessity of change of zoning is on the applicant. And so we have to come into the city, we have to have a zoning. We already have a light industrial and heavy industrial in the county zoning, so it makes sense. All we need is M1. We don't need M2. Currently, as I said, the zoning is IU, which is light industrial, and IU1 heavy industrial. We are requesting the most similar zoning that allows mini warehouses and has similar setbacks as to that in the county. In closing, I do want to show you these other projects that TRG has completed or is working on. These are, this is a project in St. Louis, Missouri. The one on the left is a project in Palm Bay, and the one on the right is a project in Melbourne. And these are, one is constructed and one is other way, and I apologize, I don't recall which is which. With that, we request that you recommend approval of the requested annexation, the requested land use designation of industrial, and the M1 zoning. The applicant does not require, nor has it requested M2 zoning, and nor does it want M2 zoning. Again, we ask that we move forward. This has been delayed. I told you those dates at the beginning because we thought we'd be at City Council this meeting, this month for final reading. And they have construction plans ready to submit as soon as we find out where we have to be. With that, I do have Mr. Orlando and Mr. Garrett here, Garrett George, if you have any questions. And if you have any questions that require the use of a site plan, then I can give those to you as well.
Member Rogers.
I actually just have a question for Eddie. So this was erroneous information that they received, that it would be necessary to be annexed if they were to access city water and sewer? Did I understand that that's what was thought? I thought she said that you were told.
We were
that
told we had to annex.
you had to
initially.
annex if you were going to receive water and sewer
Yes,
service.
because we meet the annexation standards under Florida statutes.
That is correct. So the city's code says that any applicant who's requesting city utilities, if they are consistent with Florida state statute for annexation, they must apply for annexation.
Oh, okay. However, if they don't receive annexation, you can still provide the water and sewer just through one of these agreements that you described.
Correct. The code doesn't say that city council has to approve the annexation. They just require that the applicant apply for it.
But it's at a premium cost.
Is that so?
Yeah,
How much of a premium cost is it, Eddie?
20%
I'm not sure what we're talking about, 20% of
The
what?
utilities,
utilities.
the utilities are more expensive.
Member Moscoso.
Just out of curiosity, the applicant is not local, correct?
Well, they live here, but they work in Orlando.
Okay. And right now, we have over 7,000 approximately units that have been approved in Titusville. And so one of the concerns I have is that we need to be providing jobs. This is an annexation. It doesn't mean that we have to do it. We're talking a lot about zoning, but I think the main discussion needs to be, is this what we want to do? Do we want to annex? Does the city of Titusville need another storage unit? Because we're the people that live here. We're the people that have to see these things. Is that a necessity we have in our city to add more traffic, to add more to our sewer and things like that? So that's something that I'm thinking about as we're hearing this presentation. Is it something that we need? Because we have the decision to annex or to not annex.
Member Faison.
I have a question about setbacks.
Yes, sir.
So understanding that M1 and M2 have different setbacks, if you were given an M2 designation, how would that impact the construction?
You have to come up here. It has to be in the microphone and.
State your name for the record.
John Orlando with TRG Development. The side setbacks would impact the layout that we have. And what we're really trying to do is reduce the impact to the wetlands. So we would have to redesign and potentially impact more wetlands in order to get the square footage to make the project feasible. So we're really trying to keep within the boundaries and consistent with Brevard County, which is where we started.
Now, please forgive me, because it didn't compute. All right, so you're saying that with the M2 setbacks, which are greater than the M1 setbacks, correct?
Correct. So they're,
Okay.
I don't know what the dimensions
So
are.
if the M2 setbacks are greater, moving you more inward, how do you impact more wetlands?
Because some of the wetlands aren't on the perimeter, they're within the body of it, and we've tried to stay away from those setbacks. The setbacks would be the side setbacks, not the setbacks on the L shape. So we would not have this, we would have to impact those setbacks, impact the wetlands on the back of the property and the L shaped in order to accommodate the square footage that
Bear
we're
with
looking
me for just one moment
Sure.
while I
Yeah,
pull
pull
up your site plan here,
Right.
okay? So I'm looking at the site plan,
Right.
and I'm looking at the L shape.
Right.
And to the long side L, right, there is a pond.
Pump?
On the long side of the L, there's a pond.
Oh, pond. I'm sorry, I thought you said pump.
I apologize. So
Yes.
there's a pond, right?
Correct.
And on the short side L, so if we were given an M2 designation, where would you make the changes and how would that impact the wetlands?
So we would have to squeeze the building over, the big building over to the south and impact the wetland that's on that leg of the property. And then the wetland that is just above the pond, we would impact that wetland as well and potentially the wetland above it in area 2. We have to make up the square footage that's in some way. So what we try to do is squeeze this in essentially around the wetlands and make as little as impact as possible. So what you see here wouldn't even exist. We would have to completely redo the site plan.
Correct,
Okay.
correct. And I'm with you there. But, and so number one, I'm all in favor of least restrictive, right?
Okay.
And so when you want the M1, I'm with you. But when you tell me that the M2 creates a greater impact to the wetlands, I'm just trying to visualize
Oh,
that.
sure, yeah.
Okay.
The problem with this is we'd have to totally redesign it, and it wouldn't look much like this at all.
Yeah, no, well, I've now moved to the environmental constraint.
Okay.
So I'm looking at that now.
Yeah,
But okay, so nonetheless, so you're looking for an M1. Again, there are other M1 properties, there are other M1 zoning areas already in that. And to your point, to the east of the State Road 405, the intent there is to be less restrictive or to be less. And so that's why they want the heavy on the west side. And to Eddie's point with M2, the city right now is losing more M2 areas. So if we can preserve some of that, I understand the reason for Eddie's suggestion that M2 is a viable option, because it also still allows you to build your unit and be annexed. So it fits both needs, the needs of the city in the event that you don't build. Because to her point, 7,000 units are programmed or scheduled to be built in the city of Titusville, but not all are being built. So if we can preserve this piece of parcel in the event that you don't build, kudos for the city of Titusville. But if you do build, which we want you to build, you know what I mean, and stay there forever and ever and ever, and M2 is never even a thought process from here on out.
Right.
But again, as you know, not all projects get built. Okay, and so we have to levy those two questions between will you build or will you not? But thank you for answering my question.
I can assure you we are ready to build. We have completed the civil drawings, and we are ready to submit.
We all know that it's not always you. That's the issue. So in development, it's not you, it's not the investors, it's the wheel, and sometimes the wheel just doesn't come around.
I understand.
Member Moscoso.
Sorry, just to clarify, the owner is local? Because these guys are the engineer and the construction, right? But the owner is local here in Titusville?
No, the current owner is Jacksonville, which I do not believe they're local.
Okay.
Jacksonville Binge Storage.
And another question, this might be a general question, but how many jobs is this going to provide if we're using our industrial? We've got these 7,000 units that are proposed to be built. We're going to need jobs for people if we're doing affordable housing and things like that. Not everybody's going to be working at NASA. So we've got to figure out, we've got to be very wise with the land that we have. Since this is an annexation, I think we do have a bit more of a say of what gets built than typically if it's industrial and it's zoned a certain way in the city of Titusville. They can build what they want to build on that property. But since this is annexation, I think these are questions we need to be asking. Is this bringing in jobs? Is this good for Titusville?
Can you answer that question, Ms. Rosenka? Or
Well,
an estimate?
I mean, there will be some jobs. Again, there's construction jobs, then there's people that work there. I can't tell you how many. I'm not sure. I don't know that they know.
Member Rogers.
I've got way more experience with storage facilities than I wish I had. And I don't believe I've ever seen more than two full-time employees like manning a desk or something, or womaning a desk, or personing a desk, whatever it is they do these days. Sometimes it'll be a maintenance person, but I think three's kind of coming up on your max.
Member Aton.
If you don't get city utilities, is the option septic tank and sewer? Septic tank and well?
No,
or
you can't do that in Brevard County with
So
commercials.
the property's unbuildable if you,
Well, if the city doesn't annex, then
then
we have
you
to go
do
through an annexation agreement. I mean, a
Or
water
the
agreement that
utility
requires annexation at some point in the future.
Any other questions? Okay.
Thank
Do you have anything else to say?
No, sir, that's it. Thank you.
We'll now open the public hearing. Lori, do we have any cards?
I just had the one card for John Orlando.
Okay. Public hearing is closed. Any other questions of the staff?
Mr. Chairman, If there are questions, we'll certainly answer them, but I wanted to know if we could have an opportunity to clarify some of the statements that were made, especially as regards to the South Street plan and our report.
Sure.
So the question that was answered already about whether an annexation was required, our code specifically says that an annexation is required to be submitted because the property is adjacent to our city boundaries, and it was reviewed based on the statutory requirements. The other requirement was that it had to be reviewed based on our code, and it states that, and we put that in the staff report as well, that it's up to city council's discretion. Once that question is answered, if it's answered by city council to approve, then the next question is the land use. We looked at the land use, and we evaluated during a concurrency review for traffic that there was potential issue. It was reevaluated and determined to be de minimis, as stated correctly. However, future projects along this segment of South Street could have an issue as far as concurrency and could be denied. And so that, when we first saw this, we thought we probably could not process this application, or we would have to recommend denial of it because of that concurrency question. That was resolved. The expansion and widening and improvements that are planned for South Street are scheduled out pretty far out, but they are planned to be pushed up to a sooner date, potentially. The M2 that is stated on page 8 of the South Street plan, which is page 105 of your packet. I just want to clarify what that says. When this South Street plan was created and developed with the help of the public, it was to analyze what land uses and zoning districts are most appropriate where as a long-term practice. So what the evidence that was provided to you by Ms. Rosanka was to show you what land uses and zonings are there now. But what the South Street plan was to identify what is the growth potential in this area and what land uses and zoning districts are most appropriate as we receive requests. This is one of these cases where we have a request. So on page 106 of your packet, note 1 underneath that matrix, what that's referring to is note 1 in the 4th row, or 4th column rather, 5th column, where it says mixed commercial area. That is a particular area that's identified on the previous page, and you'll see under M2, that row where it says there, it's a number 1, that's referring to that note that was read at the bottom. M2 shall be permitted only where the property currently has M2 designated, and that's identifying a particular area of the study area, not this area where we're talking about tonight. It also says further, no additional properties on the east side of State Road 405 within the study area shall be assigned the M2 zoning classification. Further in the, I believe on the next page of this plan, under land use policies, it tries to discourage heavy industrial uses away from residential areas. So in other words, what the pages 102, I'm sorry, the map on page 102 of your packet and the, or was it 105? I'm sorry, 105. Looks like I got mixed around here. But the map that I referred to and the matrix that showed which zoning districts are appropriate under which areas, 105, was to identify where these different types of land uses and zoning districts are most appropriate, and heavy industrial was allocated or suggested to be allocated and consolidated in one particular area, specifically between 95 and South Street. So that's where heavy industrial uses were relegated, basically. I also want to point out that heavy industrial uses or heavier industrial uses don't necessarily equate to more traffic. There are many types of industrial uses that are very intense and may have significant nuisances, but don't necessarily generate a lot of traffic, like you might say, of a commercial development. So each use is unique. So I just wanted to make those clear. I also want to point out one thing that we did find out in looking at the code while the discussion was happening is that outside city customers there is a 10% surcharge on utilities for outside customers. So there is a discount when you come in the city. No, excuse me. Come in the city, excuse me. It's not 20.
Okay.
Those are the other things we wanted to point out.
Mr. Rogers.
I just want to thank you for that clarification, Brad. That was helpful.
Chelsea, as I understand, 3 motions are needed for this action. Is that correct?
Yes, that would be ideal.
Huh?
Yes, that would be ideal.
Okay. Any other discussion? Member Faison.
Yes, I would just like to, again, this is for us here up here on the dais. I'd like to, let's stay focused on the topic here. I know that we have a burning desire to talk about a lot of other topics, i.e. affordable housing and whatever, but that doesn't pertain to this particular applicant. So let's stay focused on the applicant and address their issues as an individual issue. That way we don't conflate topics.
Anyone care to make a motion? There's a squeaking noise back here. And heard on the right side of the desk, they think it's a bomb. Yeah, no. Mr. Faison.
Yes, I move that we approve the annexation of this parcel, as stated here, into the city of Titusville.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Lori, roll call, please.
Vice Chairman Aton,
Yes.
Member Perez,
Yes.
Member Moscoso,
No.
Secretary Grant,
Yes.
Member Rogers,
No.
Member Faison,
Yes.
Chairman Richardson.
Yes. Second motion.
Should we give reasons?
I move that we go ahead and approve the, how do I want to say this?
I assume it's the zoning, Chelsea, is that right?
Yes.
Correct?
Yeah,
Second one is the comprehensive future
Okay.
land use, the
that's it.
legislative item.
So, yep, so I move that we approve the comprehensive future land use, is that the M1?
Yes, the request is for M1. It's from,
The land use question is to the city's industrial land use category.
That. I move, as Brad has stated.
Is there a second? Member Rogers?
Was that for M1 or to
The
M2?
M1 is the third ordinance. That's the rezoning ordinance. We're on the land use ordinance.
Right.
Second.
Okay, seconded by Vice Chairman Aton. Any discussion? Member Rogers, you're happy to light on? Okay. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Secretary Grant,
Yes.
Member Rogers,
Yes.
Member Faison,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Aton,
Yes.
Member Perez,
Yes.
Member Moscoso,
Yes.
Chairman Richardson.
Yes. Member Moscoso, are you prepared to make the third motion? Your light's on.
Alrighty, I got it. All right, I move that we go ahead and rezone this piece of parcel to M1.
Second.
Seconded by Vice Chairman Aton. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Member Faison,
Yes.
Member Perez,
Yes.
Member Moscoso,
Yes.
Member Rogers,
No.
Vice Chairman Aton,
Yes.
Secretary Grant,
Yes.
Chairman Richardson.
Yes. Okay. The 3 motions pass, and this will be heard by City Council when? The first hearing next November 14th, which is next Tuesday.
That's the first reading,
First reading, I know.
and the final reading will be November 28th.
Okay, next item, 9B. Eddie?
I had a question. Should we give our reasons for the no's?
Yes, go ahead.
Sorry. I just said no on the annexation because of the issue that I raised regarding adding commercial or industrial space to the city and its impact on the live local status. And also, I think, I do agree with Member Moscoso that I think we shouldn't lose heavy industrial that might bring more jobs than what is proposed there because it seems like there's there are, as has been said in the staff report, not a whole lot of places that we have it, and sooner or later you need it somewhere.
Member Moscoso, do you want to state your reasons?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what Member Rogers said, so the same.
Next item, 9B.
Christy Anderson, Senior Planner. Item 9B begins on page 119 of your agenda packets. This is an ordinance to allow assisted living facilities in the urban village zoning district. This is a legislative item. The draft ordinance is a privately initiated request from Chelsea Anderson Esquire to amend the city's land development regulations to allow assisted living facilities in the urban village zoning district. The ordinance proposes to allow an assisted living facility as a permitted use with limitations in the UV zoning, utilizing the conditional use permit limitations currently listed for the R2 and R3 multifamily zoning districts. The Urban Village District is a special district designed to protect the substantial special public interest of the areas described in the US 1 Corridor Master Plan, which was conducted in 2007. The Urban Village Zoning District is limited to 3 redevelopment sites: Titus Landings, Titusville Resort and Destination, and Riverwalk Village. These are substantially large properties between 20 and 30 acres in size. The Urban Village Zoning District does promote mixed-use developments with higher intensities, residential and commercial offices, and other similar uses with greater height limitations. Pursuant to LDR Section 28-328A, the purpose statement indicates that maintenance of this district's character as identified in the adopted US 1 Corridor Master Plan, along with the harmonious coexistence with the surrounding land uses, are paramount concern. It is further intended that the district be in accord with and promote purposes set forth in the comprehensive plan, the urban mixed-use future land use designation, and the US 1 Corridor Master Plan. The proposed language amending the LDRs begins on page 130. I'd just like to point out that the UV limitations would not require the UV zoning districts to apply for a conditional use permit, like many of the other districts in the limitations. However, the UV zoning designations do require master plans, which are, presented to this board and to City Council for final adoption. So there are, substantial reviews that goes along with those. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have at this time.
Any questions of staff? Member Faison.
Hello. So what is the driving, what's driving this cause, this change?
This is a proposed amendment from the applicant, so I'm assuming they're gonna come up and state their reasons for this request. I believe that the proposed development at the Searstown Mall is wanting to pursue an assisted living facility in addition to their master plan.
Okay.
And currently, assisted living facilities are not allowed in the UV zoning district as to where motels, hotels, and multifamily developments are permitted.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Member Childs.
I had a question about the limited, where it's, so we're gonna put an L in that chart, right? And I always get confused on this because there's an L and there's a C, right? But you're saying this L, for limited, we do have a conditional use permit that's required for
For the UV zoning designation, the way the code is proposed here, they would not be required to obtain a conditional use permit. However, in order to develop in any one of these identified locations within the zoning district, you would be required to go through a master plan approval process.
So that's what I'm kind of confused in on page 119. It says the ordinance would carry over the conditional use permit limitations.
Those are the limitations that are tied to those R3 and
Oh,
R2.
just for
so I just
R2
wanted
and
to
R3.
make sure to
I got it.
clarify that wasn't going to be a requirement.
So the L doesn't C is the one that's just for conditional use permits, right?
Correct, and it's a little bit,
Okay.
and the conditional uses for those multifamily residential where it requires the CUP is when those developments are greater than 1.5 acres in size and they are not located on a collector arterial.
Okay. So just the limited, or limitations is just you guys approving, if it meets all the criteria.
Yeah, they would have to meet all the criteria provided in the limitations.
So no CUP
Correct.
required. Okay. Well, I really, I'd like the CUP to be required, but, all right, thanks.
Member Rogers.
So anyway, this is really being asked for in connection to the Searstown Mall property. That's the goal tonight, but it would apply to all three.
That's correct, sir.
And can you kind of like tell me exactly? I'm looking at this last one. I know the first two, but the one that's just south of 50. What are the boundaries of that property?
I have those, just bear with me one moment. For the locations for these redevelopment areas is what you're requesting?
Yeah, just
Okay.
that last one. I'm just trying to picture it. Like, is it down kind of next to the Bricks project? Is that where it stops pretty much?
No, actually, that is noted as let's see.
That's too far, isn't it? Too far south.
Yeah, it's actually the property that's located south of State Road 50 on US 1. I believe it was previously a recreational complex at one time.
It's got that funny kind of A-frame,
Yes.
like, yeah, okay,
Yes.
that's for sale or something. Okay.
I believe
It's a
that
bit
that
blighted,
property
really.
Wide,
is
smaller.
around 30 acres in size.
Tropical wonder.
How many acres?
Oh, just over 30 acres.
And there's really, is there anything else that's being, I mean, obviously the Searstown Mall has a lot of plans for that, but are you aware of anything at the moment that's in that particular location that's planned?
The one near 50 and
Yes, south of 50.
not at this time. I believe that they had submitted a permit to demo the structure, but I don't believe that we have any redevelopment plans that have been submitted.
There was a master plan that was approved on that property in the early, I think, 2007.
Oh,
And so it is governing on the property for a mixed-use development there.
Member Moscoso.
Is it necessary to, I think you mentioned having all of these properties grouped together? I know it's because of the zoning, the UV, but could we go case by case? Because we don't even know what the rest of the projects are going to be to go ahead and allow an assisted living facility there.
Limit the
Like, so say that.
amendment to one of the redevelopment sites within the zoning district, or?
Yeah, so I before we approve this, I mean, I would want to make sure that we saw the plans for these other developments before we say that that's going to be allowed there. Does that make sense?
It would be difficult to provide regulations to just a specific property in the land development codes.
So could that be considered, we do a CUP for each of those? Because I don't feel comfortable grouping them all together without knowing what the other projects are. But if there were a CUP, that would be helpful to go case by case.
That is something that you could recommend. However, those three properties would also be required to go through the master plan process, which would be presented to this board as well for
Could you explain a little bit
recommendation.
what the master plan process is?
Yeah, sure. There is a governing master plan for this property right now that had to go through a very detailed, provided a lot of detail as far as the layout of buildings, square feet, where they're located, types of uses, layout of stormwater facilities. It's almost like a 30% plans of a site plan, but not full site plan. So it gave a lot of detail to the commission and to the council to allow us to be able to get consensus from everybody in the public through the public hearing process in order for them to go through the site plan process, and it has to be generally consistent with that master plan. So it's a pretty detailed piece of
That comes
approval process.
before planning and zoning, or that has already come before planning and zoning?
There's one there governing on there's a separate master plan that was already approved for each of these properties.
Okay.
The Titus Landing property is the only one that actually implemented their master plan. The one in the south of 50, there was, as I mentioned, already approved in 2007, I believe. And then the one that is on the Searstown Mall property, that master plan was approved a few years ago. If this ordinance is approved, that master plan currently does not include an ALF. So if this ordinance is approved and one of those property owners wants to utilize this new ordinance, they would actually have to come back and amend that master plan to come before you to incorporate that new use inside that master plan. Yes, well, each one would have to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
I guess,
Member Rogers?
Brett, is that process kind of similar to getting a conditional use permit? I mean, to come back and amend the master plan?
Master plan is much more detailed.
Okay.
Yes, a conditional use permit is primarily to establish whether the use is appropriate and whether we need to identify any nuisances associated with it. Even though it's permitted in that zoning district, we want to see it's a unique type of use, and the purpose of that is to find out whether we need to mitigate any potential uses. The master plan is a completely different process. That's a much more detailed plan of development and phasing and everything for you. So it's almost like seeing a preliminary site plan.
So I guess what I'm saying is if they came back with a need to sort of modify or amend the master plan, it's not just like a rubber stamp yes. I mean, it's there could very well be someone who says, no, that doesn't fit the master plan and that's not what we want and you can't do it.
Correct.
Member Moscoso?
So an option would be instead of the applicant asking for for assisted living facility and the UV zoning, they could ask for a CUP. Is that correct?
The CUP is not currently, this use is not even allowed in that zoning district right now. That's the issue.
Yeah.
So there's a private request to allow it. And then if you do ask for it to have to be approved through the CUP process, that's just an extra step they'll have to go through, in addition to any amendments to the master plan.
I like the CUP process as a member of the public because it gives people a chance to be notified of what's being built and have a chance to come up and speak for or against it. And so I say whenever we have the option to give the public opportunity to know about a project, I'm for that. So.
Vice Chairman Aton?
So, but UV zoning is unique in that because a master plan's required, which is even more stringent than a CUP, having a CUP on top of a master plan or underneath a master plan could be redundant because you're going to get everything you get with a CUP as part of the master plan. Is that accurate or not accurate?
So there, several years ago, Titus Landing, after they got their master plan approved and started development, they decided they wanted to, well, as part of the master plan, they had proposed a movie theater. And at the time, a movie theater was required to go through the conditional use permit. And so in addition to the master plan that was approved, they had to go through a subsequent process just for the movie theater. So this would be, if a CUP is required as part of this ordinance that's being drafted to you tonight and is approved that way, in addition to having to amend their master plan, they will also have to go through a CUP just for this particular use.
Okay, Mr. Rogers?
Because it's a new use, would an assisted living facility be able to apply under rules connected to the Live Local Act if it was for people of lower income?
Wow.
An assisted living facility is a different type of development and use than a residential development. It's not the same.
Member Faison?
So there's a lot of questions that are being asked right now. I think it's a good time to hear from the applicant.
Me too. Thank you. We'll now hear from the applicant.
Hello, good evening. I'm Chelsea Anderson, attorney at Mangrove Title and Legal, 1530 US Highway 1, Rockledge, Florida, 32955. And I am here on behalf of Titusville Mall LLC. I do have Jesse Wright, who is the authorized agent of that company. And he is the owner of the Titusville Mall site, which is the old Searstown Mall site. Thank you very much to the staff for your report on this. Basically, we're asking for this use to be added as a permitted use with limitations, incorporating the same limitations that are applicable to other mixed-use districts in the code already, so that we can have another use type for this property. Trying to go through all the questions that were in there. So that's precisely why we did not propose putting this as a conditional use permit, is because we already have the added layer of a master plan. It's a very onerous process. My client applied, I believe, in 2020, and then it was October 26th of 2021 that we got approved for that master plan. And if this is approved and we want to go forward with an assisted living facility use on the site, we would again have to go through the master planning process. So it's just taking away one extra layer of putting the conditional use permit on there as well. So that's why we did not propose adding it as a conditional use, instead having a permitted use with limitations, the same limitations that are already applied to other mixed-use districts with this use that is allowed. There is some, as the staff report said, and as staff mentioned, this would only apply to 3 sites in the entire city. Titus Landing, my client's property, which is the Titusville Resort and Destination, and then Riverwalk Village. I do have a map of the boundaries if you guys want to see that, but it's basically across from Kennedy Point Park. I think it has multiple ownerships right now. I'm not 100% sure what they're doing on that site at the moment. There is support for this in the comprehensive plan. All of these sites have urban mixed-use future land use that promotes a mixture of uses, including high-density residential, commercial, and office use. And then they're also part of the US 1 corridor master plan. They're specifically identified as redevelopment sites where mixed use, including residential, commercial, and office, are encouraged and recommended as part of that master plan that was done. And then also the underlying UV zoning also encourages a mix of higher density residential use, commercial use, as well as office use. So my client is looking at doing assisted living facilities as part of this development. It's not currently in the master plan. We would have to go back, but first we need to allow the use at all in the district. So this would be the first step. I have my client here to speak a little bit. This is not site specific just to his property. You know, it's for all 3 sites in the city, but we can try to help answer some questions that you have with respect to his property. And we hope that you'll support this request. We're here for additional questions if you have them, and we thank you for your time.
Good evening. I started the project.
Could you state your name for the
My name
record?
is Jesse Wright, and I
know
live
who
at
you are.
3461 South Washington Avenue in Titusville, the beautiful city of Titusville. I started the project just before pandemic, 3.5 years ago. And in June of 2018, Sears moved out, left us with 90,000 square feet. They were going to subdivide and actually sublet it, and we worked out a deal. They could actually move out because we can move forward for the development. In October of 2021, we have the master plan approved for 100 unit of the ILF, Independent Senior Living, 153 room Cambria Hotel, 3 restaurants, and also 110,000 square feet of a shopping center. So it's 22 acres, and we're doing it in 2 phases. One phase would be phase 1, facing US 1, And in that, as you remember or may not remember, there's a car wash there on Country Club. Right next to it would be the hotel, about 153 room. And then next to it would be the ILF. And then on the south side would be a 240 unit apartments, and the 3 restaurant would be on the out parcel. So we're basically demoing half of the mall, about 155,000 square feet. And we would be building these 4 phases. And then once that is built, then we would be demoing the rest of the mall, that we would be putting the 110,000 square feet of the Life Center, which portion of that goes to the hospital, parish hospital. So the master plan was approved based on 100 independent senior living. The building itself, as it is right now, and it's going to go through the November 14, next Tuesday, is the final approval, is for 6-story, 100 units. So we designed this based on about 1,000 to maybe 1,100 square feet for each unit. Excuse me again. So the reason of the change, let's talk about that for a second. So I have looked at the other facilities that are in Titusville. There's about 4 or 5 of them. And I've seen that there is a need for the ALF more than the ILF. As you know, ILF is just basically apartments and for the adult living and so on and so forth. There are waiting lists for other ALF in the area, and some of them are about 18 to 20. So there's a need for this type of a zoning and this type of a usage. And so what we're doing is we're reducing the size of the 6-story building into a 3-story building. This causes less traffic. This causes less parking spaces. So we're basically running somewhere around 175,000 square feet, 6-story, down to about 85,000 square feet, 3-story. So the facility would be, I wish I could actually show the 2-minute video, but I tried to see if I could get Brad to do it, and he said no, so that's my second bus. But anyway, there are 25 memory care in this 100 units and 75 of the ILF, the assisted living. 3-story. First floor would be basically all amenities. You know, we have chapels there, nail salon, hair salon, full facility, 50 to 60 staff that's going to be running it. The whole project, the entire 22-acre project, is being divided up through the minor division into 5 parcels. So you have basically the hotel, the ALF, the apartments, 240 apartments, the out parcel, and then the Life Center, 5 parcels. We're dividing it up because of the financing, and these days getting financing is not that easy, right? So for the demolition, I'm paying like 14%. Like about a year ago, it was like about 10%, much higher now. So that's what we're doing, and so the ALF portion is going to be a financing of about close to about $50 million. The entire project, I can run through the numbers with you if you like. The total cost of the project is about $235 million. The cost of building the Titus Landing was about $70 million. Titus Landing was only 2 components, medical and retail. Now we have medical with offices and retail in the phase 2. We have hospitality, residential, ALF, and restaurants in this. Now, they've done a impact study that was paid for, not by me, by the economic development with the zone, in the county, and I can provide that report. I didn't bring it. So based on that report, they came up with the following. They came up with 365 jobs on the construction side, but 425 jobs on the private sectors. All the businesses are going to be creating these jobs. It would add $28.6 million to the North Brevard County GDP. And again, I can provide that report. I'm not making all these things up. So on November 14, we're hoping to get the site plan completely approved based on the number of apartments being 240, 7-story, and the ALF that is 6-story. So we're going to go back to the city and reducing the size of the building at 7-story down to about 6-story. Money is kind of expensive. That's why I'm cutting off a whole floor for this. And then the ALF portion, we're cutting it down from 6 to about 3, as I mentioned before. So I've discussed that. I've mentioned the 25 memory care, 75 assisted living. We've done a traffic study, number of cars coming in terms of demands is going to be much less traffic, less parking. And the very last thing I want to mention is that I have developed projects in 5-6 different cities. I've developed project in Selma, California, in Torrance, California, in Crossville, Tennessee, Nashville, Tennessee, South Haven, Mississippi, Jackson, Mississippi. And I have been very, very happy with the staff and the way that this city has supported this project. And I really appreciate everything they've done. And to those people that were striking the other day, I would like to strike against them to tell them, calm down and work things out with the city, because everybody in the city has been extremely helpful. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Wright, as I recall, I think Member Grant and I were the only members here when you started this thing.
Yes, that's correct.
And as I recall, the ALF will be on the country club side, will it be?
That's correct.
Okay. About halfway.
Right, so you have the car wash, and the Cambria Hotel is going to be next door. Car wash, Cambria is about 2.8 acres. ALF would be about 2 acres. And I totally agree with Megan, if I may call you Megan, that this should have been separated. It's just not our fault to be, looped into 2 other properties. I don't know what they're going to be doing, but I just don't want to be the one that has to, answer to you why the other properties are part of this. But sorry, go ahead.
And as I recall, you promised us a Chick-fil-A where the tire kick is.
Good question. But Chick-fil-A brings a lot of traffic, right? If I bring the Chick-fil-A, then I'm going to have a lot of people waiting on US 1 to let the traffic come in. But I'm still working on it, though.
Member Faison.
Mr. Wright, thank you.
You've got a good memory, though, by the way. Yes, sir.
Mr. Wright, so once again, when you had mentioned the ILF the first time, I was wondering if it was going to be an ALF. So I'm glad to see that it's an ALF. However, being that the city, not you, the city's putting this as part of a zoning, that opens up Titus Landing to also put an ALF. And immediately our thoughts go to an ALF in Titus Landing. Why? Because there's some office space there that essentially can be an ALF. And I think that's our concern. And you've already addressed that. This is not you. This is somebody else. So I just want to kind of bring that up. Just for me, question is, are you partnering with somebody else to run the ALF?
Oh, yes. Yes.
Okay.
I'm actually partnering with a local company. I don't want to mention it now. And so they are already handling 4 other projects. One thing I have to tell you, just reiterating what Brad mentioned, I think for them to do another ALF within about 1.5 miles from us, I just can't see that, really. I'm going to really go all out. I've designed the ALF myself. I've got a civil and mechanical engineering degree. I've designed the ALF, and I've put in so many amenities on the first floor that it would be almost unmatchable anywhere else. And I've seen the competition. I've seen the competition on, I don't want to mention the names, and I know what's out there, to be honest.
Well, there's a brand new one being built. There's it's currently under construction, and it looks mighty nice.
Well, again, we're trying to get this approved through the building department to do exactly what and I wish I could actually show you the 2 minutes, but maybe next time I'll be able to send that out.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Member Childs.
As a tenant of Titus Landing, I would have no problem with an assisted living facility there to bring customers right there. Yeah, living there, that'd be great. But anyway, so I have no problem with that if it branched out. But I don't think there is a little bit left to build over there, and there's a big space that's available. But I don't think they're gonna They don't have any plans
We
to
have a
build
space for
anytime
you if you
soon.
decide to move down to our.
Well, we are going to be closing because it's not great. Anyway, I'm not going to hear it here. But anyway.
By the way, if I could just mention, there was another project right across from my project that was approved for the memory care and assisted living. And I guess they ran over the timeline that they were going to build. I don't remember exactly the address. Brad, I don't know if you remember which one that was. But it ran over the timeline and the project was canceled.
Rio Lago, is that what you're referring to? It's a property called,
Yeah,
okay.
I think
so.
I think so, yes.
on US 1. Member Rogers.
So, Mr. Wright, I'm not familiar. I'm new here, and in fact, I'm just an alternate. But I'm not familiar with the project really, except that I worked with and was friends with Jane Spidell, who did mention you from time to time, and said she thought you were doing your best to do a good job there. If I understand what I remember of her description of the project, because the main building was going to be fairly high in the middle, it was stepped back. Am I correct, to sort of reduce the visual impact?
Yeah, so we've done a I call it shady study, but anyway, shading study, which we had to make sure that the height of the buildings are not going to be, going in somebody else's private bathroom, whatever. But so, yeah, we're reducing the size of that 7-story, which was a mid-rise, down to about 6. Yes, so the shading study was done. And so the only building that is going to be, so the hotel is going to be 5.
Mm-hmm.
ALF is going to be 3.
Okay.
And the apartments are going to be 6.
Okay.
And that's the height below the 70 feet, which is below the mid-rise.
And they're all 3 separate buildings, or they're?
Oh, yes, separate buildings,
okay.
separate parcels, right.
Okay.
Mainly because of the financing.
Okay.
You can't get the same lender to loan on the whole project.
Oh, I
You have
see.
to have different
Okay.
lenders, and I got to dance to exactly what they want to, and that's another problem.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Open the public hearing. Do we have any cards?
There's no additional cards than the 2 that spoke.
Anything you want to say in conclusion?
So we spent a lot of time talking about my client's property because that's why we're here. We do appreciate and understand that this does affect the 2 other sites. But I would like to just point out again that there is the master planning process that they would have to go through. They can't just, decide to slap this on their site without having to come back through here, go through all the hoops, show that they meet the criteria, not only for the ALF that we're adding as a limitation for this zoning district, but also compliance with the US 1 Master Corridor Plan, compliance with the master planning process for Urban Village. So there's still a lot of regulation that makes it difficult to get a project approved. So this is just, opening up the door for it, but it's not, I don't know that it would even be feasible on Titus Landing as their site plan is right now, so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think I lost my voice talking about Chick-fil-A. Public hearing is closed. Okay. Member Grant,
I'd like to make a motion.
go ahead.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve the ordinance to allow assisted living facilities in the urban village zoning districts.
Second.
Member Faison, do you second?
No, it doesn't matter. Second. Member Rogers has a second.
Okay. Any further discussion?
I just have one question, and this is for staff. So the going back to modify the master plan only becomes relevant if they're going to build a new building. But if they were, for example, if a store moves out, somebody can move in a ALF into an empty office space.
I believe it has to be a substantial change that's listed in the requirements of the master plan revisions.
The master plan was approved not to include an ALF right now, so it has to be amended to include this use. Through that process, we're going to be asking for information related to where that's going to go, how it's going to be related to the other uses, and whether it's compatible. So it's not just if this property is developed under the current master plan, and then someone later on wants to try and put in an ALF in one of the buildings. The master plan would have to be amended in order to allow that use.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, Brad, maybe it's a misunderstanding, but I thought it was mentioned that the ALF was part of the master plan originally, or was it part of the original plan but not the master plan?
An ALF is a use that's currently not permitted in the urban village zoning district.
And it's not in the master plan.
And it's not in any of the master plans because of that.
I'm sorry, then, Mr. Wright, what was it you said about how it was originally
So, yeah.
ILF.
ILF. I know they sound the same. It's independent living. Assisted living is highly regulated through ACA and
Okay.
the Department of Health. Yeah.
I'm half deaf, I misheard.
Any other questions? Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Member Moscoso,
Yes.
Secretary Grant,
Yes.
Member Faison,
Yes.
Member Rogers,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Aton,
Yes.
Member Perez,
Yes.
Chairman Richardson.
Yes. And this item will be heard next Tuesday night. Next item is 9C, Brooks Landing.
Thank you, Chairman. Item 9C, Brooks Landing Phase 1 replat. And this may look familiar to you all because this was previously approved by P&Z on July 19th and by City Council on July 25th. Brooks Landing is an 81-lot, single-family home subdivision located north of JJ Road and west of Hammock Road. The overall Brooks Landing subdivision consists of 143 lots on approximately 71.99 acres. The final plat for Phase 2 will be submitted in the near future. After the final plat was recorded, scrivener's errors and omissions were found by the county's mapping department, and this requires a replat according to Florida state statutes. And so this is to make corrections that were found to errors on the previous plat.
Any questions? Member Moscoso.
Yeah. What was the zoning on this property? Is it R1?
I can look that up. 1 second.
That's planned development.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Member Rogers.
Well, I find myself kind of missing Stan, who I'm sure would be happy to tell us about errors in surveying. But I was a little curious. Is this, again, because I'm new, is this pretty typical that the plat has to be sort of adjusted and I mean, what percentage of the time is that done?
Replat for errors, not typical, no. Usually we get it right on the first try.
Okay. And so this is kind of sort of on the surveyors? Is that kind of who makes those kinds of mistakes?
I don't want to say it was anyone's particular fault.
Okay.
But
I'm not saying in this particular instance, but if one has to replat and one is trying to figure out what went wrong, might one talk to a surveyor first? Or
Sure. I would also say that a replat isn't always to correct errors. Sometimes there's a change in what a track's purpose is or to change the number of lots anytime you're changing the configuration of a subdivision.
Okay. Thanks.
Vice Chairman Aton.
In staff's opinion, is the replat significantly different than the original approved plat? Or
No, sir.
Mostly? Okay, that was my expectation.
Any further questions? Well, does the applicant have anyone here?
I'm here.
Come here.
Comments, unless you have some questions.
Are there any questions of the applicant? You might have to take over. Okay, we will not open the public hearing. We'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Any other questions from the board or the staff? of anybody? There were no cards, Lori, right?
That is correct.
Yeah. Okay. Anyone care to make a motion? Vice Chairman Aton.
I move to approve the replat of Brooks Landing Phase 1 as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Member Faison.
I second.
Okay. Any further discussion? Roll call, please, Lori.
Vice Chairman Aton,
Yes.
Secretary Grant,
Yes.
Member Perez,
Yes.
Member Rogers,
Yes.
Member Moscoso,
Yes.
Member Faison,
Yes.
Chairman Richardson.
Yes. Okay. Next item, is council going to hear this Tuesday night, or do you know? Well,
You know, I should have had that answer ready for
I
you.
know. I keep
you got me
asking you.
there. I can let the commission know tomorrow morning the dates that are intended for that. I would believe it's the next
Really
meeting,
need
but I
to-
It
can
is,
confirm.
it's for the 14th.
Okay.
Yeah, next Tuesday.
really need to let the applicant know. Last item, Live Local Act Ordinance and Resolution. We've got a lot of stuff to discuss. We've got several versions. Who wants to speak? The staff.
154 of your packet begins the agenda item. So the city council heard your recommendation when this ordinance was brought before you last month. They heard from some members and of the public that some concerns about the ordinance and decided not to go forward with it, and in fact gave us staff direction to send it back to the commission through the public hearing process. So tonight's meeting is the public hearing, and it was re-advertised for tonight, and then the council then also tabled their public hearing to next Tuesday. So they may or may not make a decision that night. Good night. The changes I want to point out to you from the last time you saw this. If you go to page 156 of your packet, you'll see the ordinance again with the whereas clauses. And then on page 158 of your packet, I've highlighted the changes from the last time you saw this. And I'd like to try to explain what these changes are. Page 158 of your packet. So the definition of mixed-use residential, we try to tailor our current definition from our code with the law and what it says. The law actually doesn't specifically have its own mixed-use definition. So you see here in highlight what we've added to the language, a replaced language, and it says pursuant to Chapter 2023-17 Laws of Florida, known as the Live Local Act, shall mean the development of attractive land or building or structure with two or more different uses to include affordable housing and uses permitted and limited in the underlying zoning district. So in other words, if a development is going to be proposed on a property that is currently zoned commercial or industrial, the underlying zoning will determine what that mixed-use component will be. So a community commercial or a regional commercial zoning district or an industrial zoning district, the uses that are permitted within that particular zoning district will make up the mixed-use component, whatever that might be. At a minimum, 65% of the total square footage of the mixed-use development, and we've added this language in here, floor area ratio must be residential, but no more than 80% shall be residential. At a minimum, 20% of the total square footage of the floor area ratio of the development must be non-residential. If you don't understand what floor area ratio, I'll just briefly describe what that is. It's not the ground floor square footage of a development, it's all the square footage. So if a building is going to have several floors, you're counting all the square footage of every floor together, and that's the cumulative area, that's the floor area ratio. Most of our land use categories have a floor area ratio of, for example, 1 or 0.5, or some have 0.2. What that means is if it has a floor area ratio of 1, a property that is 1 acre in size can have 43,560 square feet of development on its property, whether that's the entire lot or can go vertical and go up. Just that's what that means. So a 0.5 means it's entitled to only half of that. So if this particular development has a floor area ratio of X on the land use category, because they still have to adhere to all the requirements of the comprehensive plan and any other land development regulations, with certain exceptions per the statute, per the new Live Local Act. The floor area ratio will be the maximum. And then this definition says that mixed use component, how much of that floor area ratio will be determined as what is that mixed use component. Mixed use zoning districts. The Live Local Act says that we must administer Live Local qualifying projects on properties that are not only on industrial or commercially designated, but also mixed use areas. So we've identified in the next definition here, mixed use zoning districts shall be identified as the following. And currently the ones we have in our city are downtown, the shoreline mixed use, the urban mixed use, the urban village, and the regional mixed use multifamily, and the Indian River City neighborhood, IRCN, commercial subdistrict. I want to stress, we've received lots of questions, comments, versions, how should I say, suggestions on how we can tweak this. I can't emphasize enough that if this ordinance is not adopted, it doesn't matter. The law tells us we must process a Live Local qualifying project. So if we do not have an ordinance, then we have to review a project based on the law. And that's it. And so because of all the gaps that are missing from that law, we are going to have to work with a property owner or developer on how to apply their project consistent with our comprehensive plan and our code. And the reason why we suggested having an ordinance is to make a call. So for example, the law says that we must allow a Live Local qualifying project to utilize our existing multifamily standards. Every city is different. There was a mention at your last meeting about a sampling of some other communities and how they're handling this. Every community is different. A lot of coastal communities do not have the issues that we have. A lot of coastal communities, for example, are small. They don't have a lot of industrial land. They don't have a lot of commercial to deal with. And a lot of communities actually just have primarily mixed-use zoning. In fact, some communities don't even have Euclidean zoning like we do. Some communities have large areas of single-use districts that they have to be concerned about. One of the issues with this law is that it says that you can have multifamily development on an industrially zoned property. Now, there are some federal conflicts there where you're allowing mainly low-income people to be placed in areas that are industrial, and there are some certain environmental justice issues related to that. Wasn't addressed in this law, and so we have to abide by it. Non-residential uses. Some we have to include, in our case, a mixed-use component for a Live Local qualifying project. Not every city has to do that. Not every city has the 20% threshold issue that we are dealing with. So a lot of communities, especially large cities, they have a lot of industrial and commercially designated areas that are way above that 20% threshold and don't have to worry about it. So you see places like Melbourne, Tampa, and many other large cities and counties especially don't have to address that issue. Small cities might have to address it, but because their type of zoning, like coastal communities, and they're primarily built out, don't necessarily have to worry about this too much. I think it's more about the middle-sized cities like ours that probably have the bigger issue. So we did this analysis to see if we meet this 20% threshold, and all we did was look at the zoning districts as they're classified in our code currently, and we currently have them classified as commercial industrial. Took the square feet of all those, or acreage of all those properties, or designated those particular commercial or industrial designated or zoning districts, added it up, and we came up with a calculation that shows that we are below that 20% threshold. So we must include a mixed-use component in a Live Local qualifying project. The law does not tell us how to do that. So that's why a lot of communities are just making a call. They're either adopting an ordinance, a resolution, or doing an administrative approval or interpretation to say, this is how we're going to apply this. But when you make new regulation, that's why it's better to put it into an ordinance, because it then has more teeth. And that's why we suggested this ordinance. So the next definition here, where it says non-residential, shall be identified as those uses in Chapter 28. Chapter 28 of our code is the zoning, and that also includes Article 4, use table. That's the use table where we identify all the zoning districts and what uses are allowed underneath each one of those zoning districts. So again, what this is saying is, if you're going to propose a live local qualifying project on a commercial or industrially designated or zoned property, the mixed use component is going to be the uses that are permitted on the underlying zoning district. The development standards on that same page, page 158, we tried to address those gaps. On paragraph B, all multifamily residential development standards described in the code, except as described in this division, including but not limited to access management, landscaping, parking, shall apply to the residential development within the project. I believe, and we believe in our staff, that this tells us that they have to adhere to all the other requirements of the Live Local Act does not exempt. Right now, that is density, height, and where you can place these on industrial or zoning or commercial zoning. So everything else still applies. So we're going to have to work with the property owner to make sure the developer that they comply with the comprehensive plan and all the policies that are in that, including our land development regulations. There are going to be some unique situations. On an industrial zone piece of property, there may be a situation where you may have a residential development plus a non-residential or the mixed-use component being some kind of industrial use. How does that work together? Because our code does not account for that. We specifically relegate industrial uses on industrial zoning districts that are separated from residential. So paragraph 2, which I've got highlighted here, says the interior buffer between industrial and residential uses shall be at least 30 feet. We base that. We have to come up with a rational basis for some of these standards. In the code, it says a residential development must have a 20-foot landscape buffer, and then the industrial development must have a 10-foot landscape buffer. So we just added 2, and that's why we have 30 here. The next paragraph, 3, the commercial component of a mixed-use project shall share the same access as the multifamily component of the project. Now, this is unique. So sometimes commercial development, like the urban village zoning district, which allows commercial and residential development, should have shared access points. You don't want every lot or every part of this project to have many, many different driveways, because that creates an access management issue and it creates a safety issue when you have a roadway with many, many driveways. So this is here to allow for that option for the 2 uses on that same development that's zoned commercial to share the same access points. We've had many examples of that. We've approved many examples of that. On the next page, on page 159, the open space, we've added a component about that. Again, this is something that if we want to include this, typical mixed-use developments in our city have some kind of common recreational open space component. It's to serve the residents there and to serve potentially the people who are going to be invited on the property for that mixed-use component. An urban village zoning district, for example, or the regional mixed-use zoning district, or even the downtown mixed-use zoning district has a requirement that every development has some kind of open space, recreation, common area, civic plaza component of some sort. So if this ordinance is adopted, we are suggesting that there be some kind of mixed use or open space component with that mixed use development. And we believe that the urban village standards are the most appropriate, primarily because the industrial and commercial zoning districts are along commercial corridors, just like the 3 urban village zoning districts are along commercial corridors. So we thought that that was the most appropriate. That's why we selected that. On paragraph K, on page 159 of your packet, it says, the city must consider reduced parking requirements, and I've highlighted what's the change, for the development if the development is located within 1/2 mile of a major transit stop and is accessible from the development via continuous ADA-compliant pedestrian facility. This is something that the statute says that we must consider reduction of parking spaces with this criteria. Now, we've tried, it doesn't give us very good criteria, so we've added this language in here to help flesh that out. Now, I know there were some suggestions. We're open to any suggestions how we can make that more tight, if we can, but we are required to consider this reduction of parking. On the next page, on page 160 of your packet, we've included an expedited review process. It's very general. We currently have a process right now for affordable housing projects. All they do is provide to us evidence that it is an affordable housing project, and that's typically based on because they're getting some certain kind of state financing or whatever that might be, or they're proposing a restriction on the property. We evaluate that with a simple form through our neighborhood services department, and then what we do is consider it to be expedited review. It just goes on top of the list of a reviewer each time that project comes in for review. So it does shorten a little bit the amount of time that this project has to go through our typical site plan review process, but it's not significant. In this case, we're going to ask the applicant to provide to us something that shows that this is going to be a bona fide affordable housing project. And so what we learned from the Florida Housing Coalition and from other communities is that they're coming up with deed restrictions or forms. We're working on that right now internally as an administrative step for us to be able to process that and make sure that we can qualify a project under this law. But I don't believe it's necessary to put it into an ordinance. If we need to, we have a resolution that we've added in this packet, which starts on page 162 of your packet. Procedures can be included in a resolution. Resolutions are easy to adopt. They don't require public hearings when they're amended. They just come before you. They just come before City Council as a consent item, typically. So we believe that based on some of the other examples we found from other communities, that maybe a checklist is probably the best way for us to verify, at least have some kind of form that is sanctioned and approved by City Council to verify whether a project is qualifying as for the Live Local Act. So you see on page 162 and 163, these are just checklists, which we do currently with several other site plan and other development applications that we have currently. Now, there are other forms that are probably going to be needed and other pieces of information and evidence can be needed with each one of these checks, these check boxes, basically, that needs to be provided. And if we are satisfied that they have provided the information that's necessary for us to determine that it qualifies for this law, such as a bona fide, a deed restriction that's going to be recorded on the property that's going to restrict this number of residential units for affordable housing for this number of years, we'll check that box. We've added a fee on page 163 of your packet. This is a small fee. This is something we just generally came up because we estimated how much time it would take to complete this form, this checklist. This is in addition to our typical site plan and development permit fees. So an applicant has to submit to us an application for a site plan, has to pay our regular fees and any building permit fees. This fee that we're proposing here is not in replacement of all of that. This is in addition. Now, if you believe that we need to increase this, we certainly can. We learned just recently from a webinar that we attended on Monday that there are other communities, a few, that have developed some mechanisms in how to do that. And so we can certainly evaluate that. But if this resolution is adopted, this is something we can easily come back to City Council and amend easily without having to go through the public hearing process. So again, procedures are best placed in a resolution. Because of the concerns that we receive from City Council and the potential, from staff's point of view, risk of not having an ordinance that we can back ourselves up with when we're negotiating with applicants on how to qualify for the Live Local Act, we decided to generate a memorandum of understanding, interpretation, and application. And I believe I've given you a hard copy of that on your dais. I've sent that to you in an email, but I also gave you a hard copy. We just tweaked one paragraph on there. It's also on the agenda star, if you want to open it up there. Chelsea is going to hand out an email that was sent to us by Commissioner Gerard. He is not wasn't available to attend today, but he did want to share his opinion about this with you. Yeah, and I also saved his email on Agenda Star if you'd like to read it there as well. So in the event that the ordinance and resolution is not approved by City Council, we have submitted to the city manager a memorandum, which I'm just on page 1 of the memorandum, the hard copy handout that you have. And this provides an administrative interpretation and how we will apply the Live Local Act in our particular scenario, in our case. And so it describes what the law is and what it requires. We've laid out the specific section, which is the most important section here right now, is that section 166.04151, paragraph 7A of the Florida statutes. This is the Live Local Act. The Live Local Act is 60 pages, and it had a lot of provisions in it about tax incentives and property tax reductions and all kinds of other provisions about where we're going to put money that could be laid out for all kinds of affordable housing projects. But the most important part, this subparagraph 7, is what every city and county is dealing with right now, is trying to figure out a way to address this. So this memorandum only addresses that portion of the Live Local Act. So it says, we just reiterated again what this statute says, we must approve a multifamily residential on any area zoned for commercial, industrial, or mixed use if at least 40% of the residential units in a proposed multifamily residential development are, for a period of at least 30 years, affordable as defined by Florida statute. And we stated here for purposes of determining mixed-use districts, and we went on and we've reiterated what we've already said in our ordinance. This is how we're going to apply this. These are the zoning districts we think are appropriate or are consistent with what the law says. And these are the mixed-use zoning districts we think it's talking about. And every city has to figure this out in some way. And this is what we determined for the city of Titusville. Paragraph 2, it states, this is from the law, cannot require a change in land use or zoning, conditional use permit, variance, comprehensive plan amendment for height, zoning, and densities. We didn't even need to make a comment about that. We just can't require a public hearing. A Live Local qualifying project must be approved administratively. There have been suggestions from the public that we received today to maybe put this, or require some kind of public hearing notice, public notice process, public hearing schedule, bring it before our Administrative Development Review Committee, which would be a quasi-judicial process before an administrative level staff, but it would be a public hearing. I don't think we can do that. That's not what this law allows. So we disagree with that proposal. Paragraph 3 on the next page of the hard copy you have here, page 2, density cannot be restricted below the highest allowed residential density in the city. Currently, we believe that's 40 units per acre because we found in the RMU, the regional mixed use 300 zoning district of the code, it says 40 units per acre, which is more than what we thought. And the downtown mixed use zoning district is 30 units per acre. So we actually think it's actually higher. Paragraph 4, height cannot be restricted below the currently allowed commercial or residential developments within 1 mile or 3 stories, whichever is higher. Our code is unique because we have two running issues here. One is the commercial zoning districts do not have a height restriction, but because the Live Local qualifying project has to adhere to all development standards of the code outside of the exceptions made in this Live Local law, setbacks have to be adhered to. Well, the setbacks have to be increased if you increase the height of a project in a commercially zoned property 30 feet high, above 35 feet, excuse me. So if every foot you increase the height, you have to increase the setback. That still will apply. Another conundrum that we found in our code is that we have a height overlay, and that is only identified in 2 large areas of the city. So those areas will also, a project that is qualifying under this law that is located potentially on a commercial zoning district that might be located within that height overlay could probably benefit from that additional height as well. Every community has a different standards The city of Titusville has these two issues to deal with, and that's how we are going to address that here in this case. Now, we've laid that out in this administrative interpretation, which is pretty much the same as what we've identified in our ordinance. Paragraph 5, a development must be administratively approved if it satisfies regulations for a multifamily development. So the question is, the city of Titusville has a handful of multifamily development standards. Some communities, especially coastal communities and small communities, only have one standard. So they don't have to worry about this. So our community has 5. So we have to figure out which one we want to choose. Some communities are leaving it open to the developer. In fact, we found what was presented to the Brevard County Commissioners was a memorandum, a policy that pretty much stated the developer is going to propose what they need to provide to the city or to the county, what they're going to do and which standard they're going to utilize. The city of Titusville, if we do not have an ordinance, our argument was that we can't really regulate that or tell a developer which standard to use. They can choose which one. However, in August 22nd, before City Council, we got approval from City Council to go forward with a selection. And so we've identified here on that paragraph under 5, on August 22nd, the City Council concurred with staff's recommendation to utilize the multifamily medium density R2 zoning district standards for a live local qualifying project. So those are the zoning standards. In addition to that, they'll still have to meet other multifamily development standards we have elsewhere in the code that would probably be applicable to any multifamily development, in addition to any other development standards that would be applicable to any type of development, regardless, throughout the code. But as far as zoning standards, such as the minimum size of living units, the minimum square feet of property per unit, the setbacks, height, or not height in this case because of this exception from the law, but other standards, maximum building coverage on the property that would potentially be applicable here. We're going to use the R2 standards in this case. If there is a deviation that needs to be made to one of these development standards that we have in our code, we have a variance or a waiver process currently in our code. There has been a proposal, and I think some communities have stated this, that if you have to get a variance, then you don't qualify for this project at all. I don't know if we can do that. One of the issues that we've been trying to consider is what can we approve in an ordinance or resolution or just a plain memorandum of understanding and for interpretation of how we're going to apply this that is the least resistant, not in conflict with the code, or the law rather, and doesn't put the city in some kind of legal jeopardy. There are many communities that are currently in lawsuit right now. Doral was one city that was mentioned as an example of a city that is being proactive because they adopted a moratorium. Well, they are already in settlement agreement with a potential project proposal. Another community adopted a new mixed-use definition to try and preempt the law or get around the law in some way. They are also in legal proceedings right now in court. So there are a few cases out there where there are being some challenges because you're not meeting the intent of the law. So the legislature's watching as well, and they may consider changes to this law or make it more restrictive. They see that the communities are not meeting the intent. So when we try to say something that if you have to get a variance or a waiver, then you can't qualify, period. That doesn't account for nuances on a piece of property. A variance is a means of allowing a property owner to get a relief from a particular development standard because of a hardship that's on the property. And that would be true at the mixed-use component of an industrial use. So if a property is coming in on a commercial or industrial piece of property and they're going to put an affordable housing project on there or a mixed-use project on there, the several uses and several development buildings and all the other development standards of access, driveways, stormwater, parking, all that has to be adhered to by our code. But if there's something on the property that's keeping them from meeting the letter of the law, as far as and causing a hardship as far as design, That's the purpose of a variance, and I'm not sure we can prevent that. That doesn't necessarily mean that all variances are approved. It just means that the process has to be available to them. I've already addressed paragraph 6, reduced parking. That's in the ordinance. We're carrying it over here too. Again, we're welcome to any suggestions on how to tighten that up. Paragraph 7, the project must be mixed use if the city designates less than 20%. We've already addressed that. Paragraph 8 on the next page, 3 of the hard copy. At a minimum, 65% of the total square footage of mixed-use development must be residential. That's in the statute. So in order to implement this, the best practice that we've been receiving as a recommendation from several seminars, webinars, instructions, meetings, interviews, and research that we've done in other communities, floor area ratio is the best way to go about doing this. Application procedures. So in this memorandum of how we're going to interpret and apply this law, we've identified how we're going to process a request. In order to qualify for a Live Local project, the staff will request the applicant provide the following information. And we've identified several pieces of information here. One of the things I want to point out is paragraph 10 on that page, where it says, the evidence the project meets the definition of affordable housing as defined in section 420.0004 of Florida statutes. It talks about moderate income persons, defines very low persons, adjusted gross income, affordable, extremely low persons, low income persons. On the very last page of your handout, we've included the area median incomes for the Brevard County, Palm Bay, Melbourne, Titusville metropolitan statistical area. And the law does not state anything about it. What it does, it says affordable housing, according to the law, is at 120% AMI. If a developer wants to split that out, a certain portion of their affordable units is going to be 120% AMI, and then maybe qualify another portion of their units for those who are at 80% AMI, they can do that. But we can't find anything in the law that says that we can impose that. And so right now, what you'll see in 120% AMI, if you look over, and a Live Local qualifying project is supposed to be rental, on the right column there, you'll see a 2-bedroom unit could potentially have a monthly rent of $2,300. I do want to address one other criticism of staff about this. We have spent an inordinate amount of time trying to figure out a way to apply this law within our confines of our code in a fair way and doesn't violate the intent of the law. And also still protects the residents that potentially might be living at these units and still meet the requirement, that mixed use component, which is a real wrench in what we're trying to, what this law is requiring us to do. And potentially not cause certain areas that are really, supposed to be our job generating areas to be turning into residential areas and then morphing into something completely different that our comp plan and our long-range planning have ever envisioned. So I don't know what the legislature intends to do in the future or the next session about maybe adjusting things, but what I understand, I think either more than the majority or close to the majority or it was almost every representative approved and this law. So I don't think you're going to see it pulled back very much. The city worked on this all summer. We did not in any way collude with any particular developer or property owner to come up with an ordinance that works for them. We tried to come up with an ordinance and a policy that fits the law, how it applied to the city of Titusville, regardless of where this project will go. Now, we did entertain proposals and recommendations, but we didn't take them all. So I wanted to make that clear. Staff worked on this has tried to make sure that this law was as equitable as possible. Now, we've received several inquiries for a live local potential project in several areas of the property, of the city rather, and one on a property that is zoned commercial, another regional commercial, and another one hospital. But we have received one bona fide site plan only last week, or 2 weeks ago rather, for a request for a site plan to be reviewed and approved as a qualifying live local project. And we are reviewing that right now. And we have no choice but to accept it and consider it. Now, whether it qualifies as for live local, we haven't determined that. So it's still in review. And that is the Bristol project that is off of Windover Road. We do not have any other live local qualifying projects or requests for live local projects that have been formally submitted to us. But we certainly do have one qualifying one, or one formal request. So we have to review it. We have to consider it. I can't answer questions specific about that project because it's still under review by all the reviewers. And we haven't even finished a first comment, basically. And I anticipate that first comment letter is going to include a lot of requests for additional information that I've identified in our checklist and in our administrative interpretation. So this is a new pathway that we are going through right now. Our staff is still learning this. And so I'm not going to have a lot of answers about any particular project for you. But I can try and answer questions about how this ordinance or resolution, or if you'd like to suggest any changes in this interpretation of how we'll apply it administratively, we'll certainly try and entertain any requests for that and answer any questions you may have about it. That's all I have.
Member Moscoso.
So you're not going to answer specific questions, but for a live local project, let's say there is one, if it's not, it needs to adhere to our comprehensive plan and our code. If it does not, let's say, let out to a collector or an arterial road, then that would be squashed, correct?
If the code says that, depending on what's being proposed, I'd have to review that and determine that.
Okay.
Member Faison.
Thank you. That was a lot to put out today. So thank you for all of that. I have one question and one suggestion. And the suggestion goes to paragraph 6 about parking. Earlier up, it says something along the lines of.
Mr. Faison, are you referring to the administrative interpretation that we have, the memorandum, or are you talking about the ordinance or resolution?
So I thought I saw it in the ordinance. But anyways, where it was talking about parking, says if the development is within a half mile, then there will be no need for parking or something along those lines. Do you know the spot that I'm talking about?
Parking space per unit, I think, if you were within a half mile.
So you're talking about paragraph K, which is on page 159 of the packet. That's the ordinance.
Okay, let's see.
And what we have in here says the city must consider reduced parking requirements for the development if the development is located within 1.5 mile of a major transit stop. Is that what you're asking about?
Yes.
Number 6 on the back of
Yep.
this. too.
Yep. So that's what. So again, we don't have a robust transit system.
Can I just interrupt? I'm sorry, before you
Yes.
continue. If you will also look at page 172 of the package, letter E is the statutory language that code comes from, because that language in letter E says that we must consider it. And so Brad was expounding upon the statutory requirement.
Right.
Correct.
Okay. Then let's skip off of that one. Because again, you just put added language into it, so you didn't change or add. You just put language to make it clearer. So that fixed that one for me. So thank you. And then the next portion, I was going to say thank you for adding in the table at the rear, because again, something that most folks don't look at are the numbers.
You're referring to the memo.
Now, yes, going back to the memo, in that last page where it shows the dollar amounts of what the Live Local Act maximums could be for as rent and income levels. And so with that being said, since we only have one submitted application for Live Local, my question would be, that particular parcel today has a maximum density of what? And then if they were to go to the Live Local, it would increase it to 40 units. So how many extra units would that parcel, if approved, be able to grow to?
The Bristol development that we have currently in review that is requesting to qualify under the Live Local Act is proposed on property that is zoned commercial. It does not have a residential density, period. It's not allowed. But if it qualifies under Live Local, it could potentially have a maximum residential density of 40 units per acre.
And how many acres does the Bristol currently, that parcel currently?
Is it 8? Okay. The city,
26 acres? And at 2 bedrooms, 26 times 40.
1,000 units, basically, ish, right?
And at 2 bedrooms.
26 units, yeah, 26 acres, that's correct.
And where a 2-bedroom could go for a maximum of $2,300 per unit.
It's good to be in.
And they consider that to be affordable. So yeah, so let's not do anything, guys. Let's just not do anything and let this thing roll for, I'm being facetious. I'm being facetious. Do not. We need to make a decision. Okay.
Mr. Rogers.
Yeah, we do need to make a decision. And we needed to make a decision a few weeks ago, but we didn't have enough information. And, you know, I appreciate, Brad, what you guys have gone through. I'm sure I have no idea what you guys have gone through, and I'm sure it's been no fun, because I've been off and on reading this stuff for a couple of weeks now when I have a free moment, and it's been no fun. So, but I do want to say, I think that by kind of trying to tap the brakes, I feel like this has resulted in a better, more thorough result, and I appreciate that. I really do, but I just, there was a second there at the very beginning of what you were saying where I felt a little bit like we were being scolded. And maybe that wasn't your intent, maybe that wasn't even your attitude, but I just, we've been all served up, including you, a very unpalatable meal here. And I guess, you know, yeah, we got one project that has come in. There was, I kind of felt like maybe there were dozens of projects kind of hanging out there about to land, but in the end, it's been just one. So that's lucky, I guess. But and maybe we haven't put in place the mechanisms to deal with that one project yet, but I do think this process has resulted in an improvement and a better position for us, and I think it was worth taking that time. So I guess I'd like to meet you in the middle on that and just say, you know, thank you for the work you've done and thank you for the improvements you've made, but I think it was good that we took the time to do that.
Member Moscoso.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree. I think time has been needed for us to fully understand. So I saw that Miami-Dade, their interpretation of the law, they state that the height requirement does not supersede other mass controls, and this is what you were saying, Brad, such as but not limited to floor area ratio, open space, lot coverage. So I'm just repeating what you were saying. Now, I was looking up the FAR for the different districts we have, the ones that would be allowed for the Live Local Act. And we actually don't have that defined, and so and some of them. And one of them, I think the urban mixed use, we have 0.2 for FAR.
They're in the comp, if they're missing the code, they're in the comp plan.
Is it? Okay.
Each one, yes.
So I must have just looked in the comprehensive plan. So if we're going, because that's a way to limit density and height, correct? If we're going by the R2 standards, what is the FAR for that? I saw that it was 50% building coverage, but what would be the standards for FAR for an R2? Because I think that's important for us to know if that's the standard that we're going to be using.
Well, if project is going to be proposed on a commercially zoned or on a property that is got a commercial land use, has a maximum floor area ratio of that comprehensive plan, of that comprehensive plan category that's there. The law is not allowing us or requiring us to rezone a piece of property or to change the land use amendment.
So the R2 zone, those requirements we're using for what?
So the R2, in this case, if we go, I'll read through some of the standards that are in there, including the coverage requirements. So the R2 has a building coverage requirement of 50%. It has, that's a maximum, yeah, but that's the R2. A lot coverage does not have one. A front yard setback of 25, corner setback 20, interior 10 feet. One interesting thing here, lot area minimum. For multifamily development, it must be 4,000 square feet per dwelling unit. So in other words, you have a amount of property, and if you have a certain, or if you have a number of units you want to put on a piece of property, each unit has to have 4,000 square feet of property. And so that could probably limit the number of residential units as well. And that's true of any development, regardless of whether it qualifies as live local or not. Any development they start out, what is my maximum density on the property? And then I figure out, okay, this is how here's my yield. 30 units per acre, 15 units per acre, whatever that is. And you get up to that number, that magic number of residential units. But then it starts getting reduced a little bit because of development standards. Floor area ratio plays into that. Maximum coverage, design standards such as setbacks, parking starts getting involved, starts reducing the number of units depending on what they're trying to do. Stormwater requirements and landscaping and tree mitigation. So even though you may see this magic number of 40 units per acre that are maybe allowed to have, that might actually be reduced because of the corollary development standards that come into play, and that's true of any development.
So would it be beneficial for us to go over what the R2 standards are and
Sure.
how that would play out? For example, and I hate to use Bristol as an example, but that's the only example that we have right now. And so so I know that the 50% building coverage, if I'm right, would compare to 1.0 FAR. So what would that look like on the Bristol development?
If it's building coverage, based on what I read here, the R2 means you can't all your buildings can't be more than half the size of your property.
Mm-hmm.
That's what that's saying here. But that's
Since we don't
if you
have,
apply the R2 zoning district for the residential portion of this project.
and then R2, we don't have lot coverage, is that correct?
There is not a lot coverage maximum in the R2 zoning district.
Is there any way that putting something there would help as well?
So if you use the regional commercial or community commercial zoning district, because that's where they propose the residential development, there may be additional restrictions on that particular zoning district that would have to abide by. So I don't see a lot coverage in the community commercial zoning district, but I do see a building coverage of 30%. In the regional commercial zoning district, I see a building coverage of 30%, but I also do not see a lot coverage requirement.
So why do some have them and some don't have them? Were they just adopted at different times, or?
Sure. So zoning districts the way the city's Euclidean zoning districts are set up, each zoning district is supposed to be a single-use district. So the commercial zoning districts are only supposed to allow commercial developments. So the standards you see in here are specifics for the types of developments we anticipate in those zoning districts, because that's only for commercial. And in this case, typically these kind of single-use commercial zoning districts are for strip centers. And so then you want to max out how much coverage you can put on there, because you want to allow other things that will be on that property. Mixed-use development might allow more of these things, so because it might be more dense. An industrial development might have a single-use zoning district that only allows industrial uses, might have different development standards that are specific to those types of uses that are allowed in that zoning district only. So a lot of these zoning districts in the city of Titusville, I know that our initial zoning code was originally adopted in 1965, and then it was readopted, restructured, or redesigned and adopted again in 1993. A lot of things, even from the original code, were carried over. So a lot of these standards may be a mixture of what was originally approved in the 1960s and then tweaked when it was redone again in 1993. And it might have been done at the same time, and then sometimes it might be tweaks of several ordinances over the years to make changes here and there. So I can't really answer why any particular standard was developed for that you see here, but it is there, and that's what we have to adhere to.
Well, I appreciate the memo that Eddie sent out. I felt like it just gave a better understanding of the standards that they are going to be using. And so thank you for putting that together. I appreciate it.
At this point, I'll open the public hearing because I assume there's some cards. Okay. At this point, I'll open the public hearing. First card, please.
Connie Milton.
And we received a couple of communications from you, Ms. Milton.
Yes, I did. There's some hard copies, 4, 5, 6 maybe, of the second email I sent, I think, this morning.
You got to speak up.
Reasons to deny. I think that second email I sent is a few hard copies. I don't have enough for everybody. Hopefully you got it in your email. Brad, I sent it to y'all as well to make sure y'all had both. The email I sent yesterday, which was recommended text changes to your ordinance. And then this one this morning refers to line items in that email from yesterday, in that letter from yesterday. Line items are referred to on reasons to deny. One thing I want to make sure that everybody's clear on, this memorandum that Brad just ran through, this is not the language that's in the ordinance that you're looking at. If some of this was in the ordinance, that would be great, but it is not. So I suggest that the ordinance, as a minimum, be included in the ordinance, and then we can go and make comments based on this. The comments we have is based on the ordinance, which is what you're here to look at today. One concern I have is this is the first time we've heard about Bristol putting in an application 2 weeks ago. We in Wendover have multiple public records requests into the planning office requesting this data. This is the first we're hearing about it. Okay, so, this is a big concern with us. Now, we have read and reread in detail the statute, the laws, the interpretation. We've also read legal interpretations and discussions of the act. Brad and Eddie provided it to us. Here they all are, hard copies. This is Melbourne's. This is Boca Raton's. This is Titusville's. Now, the amount of paperwork is not necessarily a good indication of quality, but that just tells you the amount of work that these municipalities have gone into themselves. I'm going to get this off of my thing here. Now, I don't want to go through all this. Hopefully y'all have read the introduction of this.
Let me interrupt you. How much time do you need at
Well, if I can go through this, then some of the speakers don't have to go, continue. But if I could get like 5 minutes, 6 minutes.
Does anyone disagree with
Fine
5
with me.
minutes? Go ahead.
Okay. Yes, the Act does provide exceptions to building height densities and zoning, but it does not negate all the other requirements in the land development regulations and the comprehensive plan. The project is subject to all the comprehensive plan, all these, okay? The list is in the second page, or the first page, I think, of what I sent to y'all today. There are multiple reasons you should recommend denying this ordinance and resolution as it's currently written. All the ingredients just are not there to make this useful to the city, the citizens of Titusville, both present and future, and even to the planning office to implement. As currently written, it certainly helps the developer of a project, but it does not ensure the development continues to be viable for the lower income to continue to find safe, affordable housing. We sent the letter, I told you about that, and the numbers in my email today refer to the line numbers in the first email. So the reasons to deny, and these are very important, there is no provision or process identified to alert the public of including adjacent landowners that an application has been received to develop a property under this Live Local Act. The public must be informed when an application has been submitted on a property that is attempting to develop. So I've proposed some language. It came from some of these other cities and counties on what the process can be and should be. Post a sign out there. The planning office right now, from what I understand, in the city of Titusville, the administrative approval is Mr. Parrish. Nobody else looks at it. Nobody else has any say in it. You'll never see it. The public will never see it. City council will never see it. There is another city that has proposed the process to be, the city planning office does an evaluation. They recommend administrative approval or denial, and then it goes on the consent agenda. And then if the consent agenda, you'll see it, city council will see it. There should be some kind of process. But this carte blanche administrative approval is done by Mr. Parrish or the city manager, and nobody else sees it. That is not what I think the legislature intended. Yeah, they don't want all this hoopla going on, but I don't think they intended some person down buried in a city to be the sole approval authority. So I proposed language for that. I think the expedited review process in the ordinance should be replaced with what I'm proposing. Replace the process that addresses the concerns of the city and the public. The reasons I have are on lines 335 through 341. No adequate process has been identified for that administrative approval. I think I just went through all that. It should be on the consent agenda, is what I believe. Neither the ordinance or the resolution clearly states, because there's two things, the resolution's there and the ordinance. There's two things you're looking at. Neither of them clearly states that except as provided by the project, all other zoning and land development regulations of the zoning category are applicable to the underlying property. It needs to be very clear on that. No fuzz. It needs to be very clear. I think some of this memorandum language may say it, but the resolution and the ordinance you have today does not say that. We need to revise and replace section 29-146J. They're proposing that you wait until the certificate of occupancy before you get a deed restriction, ensuring the affordability. That's too late. These other cities are requiring a deed restriction prior to issuance of a building permit. Okay? So you need to put it earlier in the process, not at certificate of occupancy, for goodness sakes. The builder has already reaped the tax benefits, all those benefits the developer has under the affordability, and then all of a sudden the deed restriction isn't put in place. So who benefited from that? Well, the developer got a lot of profit out of it, but you don't have affordability housing now. So let them put it on paper ahead of time. Still got a little bit. I'm at number 5.
Okay, are you going to be primary spokesman for your group?
Yes.
Okay. Continue.
Okay. The section 1 in the resolution, it should be deleted. That's a checklist. A checklist in the resolution is meaningless. Meaningless. checklist, and Brad's kind of put a checklist here in this memorandum, and that's all wonderful. I think there should be some things added to that checklist, definitely. But hey, this ought to be in the resolution. I mean in the ordinance. This checklist, not in some memorandum. That who's going to be the approval authority of it? Mr. Parrish or the city manager? I don't know. I don't know who's going to. So this checklist should be in the ordinance. Will variances be allowed? Brad mentioned that. Okay. What variances are going to impact the profitability or the affordability of any development? Yeah, there are some of the cities that say if they have to go for a variance, all bets are off. You can't process under this. I believe that's a good plan. That's a good plan. And that's not in the ordinance today. That's not even mentioned here. In fact, Mr. Parrish said, oh no, we should still allow variances to go through. There are no appeal rights. There should be an appeal right, both for the developer and for the public or the adjacent landowner that says, wait a minute, you're impacting my ability on my property. You're putting this right next to my $700,000 house. So there's no appeal rights if something gets approved or denied. So there's nothing in the ordinance for that. There should be an appeal rights section. It does not adequately identify the definition of affordable housing. Now, yeah, this memorandum now does that. Great. Why isn't it in the ordinance? It's not in your ordinance that you're asked. It's not in your resolution. The project should not be allowed to discriminate between low income and all other income areas within the same development. The project must require the same entrance regardless, parking, amenities, etc. There's nothing in that ordinance that does that. Now, I've provided, and granted, it's from other cities, suggested text on that, but I've provided suggested text to be placed into the ordinance that will cover that, okay? There's no requirement identified to ensure continuous affordability over 30 years. Nothing in the ordinance that you're looking at today or the resolution that requires that. It needs monitoring. It needs documentation proof provided that the development is still affordable to the low-income population. Once the development is completed, the developer has reaped all the tax benefits. But what happens over 30 years? There's nothing in the ordinance that requires anything to be done. It should be in that ordinance. Some of these cities put it in there, and I've got suggested text that should be placed in the ordinance. Now, the $200, that's inadequate. Tampa, right off the bat, said $2,642 plus $111 per acre should be the fee for this. You should get more money for this. This is totally blowing up your years and years and years of Titusville land development regulations and comprehensive plan thought process. You should require more funds. They should require more diligent evaluation on each project that's coming in and the site plan. It's section 29-146A. It's convoluted. It's totally unclear. It's got like 3 different thought processes all bundled up in that one paragraph. I won't say the word crap, but it is. I proposed alternate language for that section, okay? It's 216 to 259 line items in the file. I could go and explain all of that. It'll take a while for that one, but please look at that 1A, it's not even, it's so convoluted, it's not even correct. The calculation of land area designation is commercial or industrial. This is where 20%. Is it 20% now? Is it 20% next week? Is it 20% next month? The ordinance as it's written says the developer is responsible to do that calculation once they provide an application or part of their application process. Why on earth would we do that? Have the planning office do it once a year, due January 1st, pick a date, for the year. And then the application that comes in for that year will abide by that percentage. So if it's 19% right now, then it's 19% for all of 2023. If it's 16.2% for January 1st, 2024, then that's the one you go with. Even they said this one project, several, I don't know, 100 acres or whatever, is going to be a minor blip. So there can't possibly be a major upheaval from one year to the next, unless you have a massive influx of annexed land. That may be a special exception, so you do an extra calculation then. But it's done by the planning office, not by a developer. Your ordinance right now says it's done by the developer. Reduced parking requirement, well, I've got some text in there. There's a whole lot better text from some of these other cities on what should be provided if the reduced parking is approved. And you're right, the bus system in Titusville, which I think that's the one hanging your hat on, you have to have 2 or more passes. Well, it doesn't run on Sundays. It only runs from like 8 a.m. or 7:30 a.m. to 6 p.m. Is that really considered a mass transit? Really? That's crap. So you need to put some more into that section. Please, I request that you deny this ordinance as written. Put a moratorium on implementing this law. Put a moratorium on that Bristol development getting administratively approved within the next day or 2 or week. I don't know what's going to happen here. We got 6 days till city council. We got 2 weeks and 6 days before council will approve on this. Is this administrative approval for Bristol going to be completed by then, and then it administratively gets approved? Based on what? This? Do you have an answer for that? I mean, are you going to stop evaluating Bristol until after the city council votes or does something with this ordinance?
The Live Local Act requires us to evaluate their request now. We can't stop that.
Well, again, can you put a moratorium on implementing the law right now in the city of Titusville so that there's enough time to put guts into this ordinance and to understand the implications? Right now, Wendover Farms is facing this. That has been in for over a year, that project, and there's issues in that project the way it's written right now. Now, all of a sudden, this, and the administratively approved variances, and administratively approve that project without anybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Please do something.
I wanted to ask a question.
Okay.
I wanted to say, thank you. Sorry, it's Ms. Milton, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And Ms. Grizzle? Or is
Yes,
Ms.
she's-
Grizzle here? Thank you, Ms. Grizzle. Both of you. I think we all have a much greater understanding of the kind of work that this took. And you went through it with a fine-tooth comb. And I don't know what we can do to see that all of these suggestions are at least considered. I will say, in the defense of our city staff, I think it's very possible that there are some pretty good reasons why maybe the language, is what it is or isn't what it isn't. I believe, if I remember correctly, that the Bristol project it sort of came and went and came and went and came and went and never got officially put in because I think they were waiting for the Live Local Act to be passed. And then once they put it in under the Live Local, basically, you don't matter, right? I mean, because, Tallahassee's basically said, you don't matter, none of us matters. Mm-hmm. We just have to say, yes, sir. But, that's not the fault necessarily of staff.
Oh, agree.
Really, this thing's in, as somebody said, almost everybody voted for it. I thought it was the Republicans, and I'm a Republican, that had done this to us, but I think it was maybe more bipartisan because everybody wants to look like they're for affordable housing, except this affordable housing is $103,000 income, $2,500 a month. I'm a teacher. That's not going to help me much, I can promise you. So I guess I would just, here's what I want to ask you. I hate to say this because you're living right there up against Bristol, right? I don't know if we're going to have something perfect in place in time to deal with Bristol. I don't know. I mean, they have to do it as fast as they can, and I don't know where they are. I think it is true. I spoke to somebody at the Florida League of Cities, and he said, there are some cities who put a moratorium on accepting live local apps, and that is not specifically prohibited, but as was mentioned, I think they're being sued right now by developers, and that also may bring some more preemptive laws from Tallahassee, to shut everybody down and prove to us that resistance is futile. I think this battle is going to be solved at the ballot box, but
But this delay would give us more time to put an
But I
ordinance
do
in
think we need more
place.
time. But I do think we need more time. And what I would ask is, what I'm going to hope for is that we all ask for a little more time in but by that I mean a week or two or something like that. And to input some of your changes and some of the suggestions from all of us who have done all this research. And then I would ask, unfortunately, for you two to look at it again, because you've been such help on this. And see, what was put in and what wasn't, because, everybody up here is a volunteer. I'm teaching school, and, everybody else is, you all are doing other things too, I know.
Yes, we'd be happy to. In fact, we'd be happy to draft the revised ordinance and then redline from there.
All right, well, I don't know what the mechanics of that would be, but anyway, I did want to say thank you, and I did want to ask for your continued vigilance, and I do certainly hope from our staff that what you've said and observed will be looked at point by point and considered.
Thank you.
Member Faison.
Thank you. Very, very well done. But I will, staff is overworked. And as you know, they're woefully understaffed.
Yes.
And those cities that you brought up have far more dollars to even hire out consultants to write their program for them. So we definitely don't want to slay staff over this, but your recommendations are spot on in a lot of areas. I would be on board with a committee that is designed maybe a week or 2 weeks to go through this and draft a proposal. Not just you ladies, although you guys are wonderful, but there are other considerations to be made as well.
We'd be happy to participate in that committee.
Well, that has to come from staff, but that is that's one of my recommendations. When I look through this, as I listen to you present this information, the reasons for deny. Again, I applaud you. I applaud you because you guys put in a ton of work, but there's a gentleman over there probably biting at the chomp over there. He has something else to add, so I would love to hear what he has to say.
Member Moscoso.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think it's really exciting when the public gets involved, and to this level, you've done a great job of even educating us on a lot of things. So I appreciate that. Member Richardson and I and Tony Schiffolo, we went to a planning, I guess it was called the American Planning Association, and we went to a conference last week, and we gained a lot of really good knowledge. And one of the things was that ordinances and things like this and staff notes should be written in a way that the public can understand and can participate. And that was one of the things I noticed when I was reading some of the other ordinances. It was written a lot clearer than ours were written. And I think that opens it up for the public to come and to participate. But I feel like you guys did a great job of going and just digging in. And maybe you have some background in this. It sounds like you do.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, but you've done a wonderful job.
Coming here over the last 20 years.
Yeah, okay. So one of the things I'll just, this is one of the slides that was put up, and it was called the legal status of the comprehensive plan. That's one of the main issues that they talked about, and it said the comp plan is king. And it gave, and this is from the American Planning Association, and the city of Titusville sent whichever members wanted to go.
As well as Councilman Stokel and Vice Mayor Robinson were with us.
So they also received this information, but it said it's a case called Pinecrest Lakes and Scheidel, and it said the court ruled that the trial judge could order a complete demolition and removal of a 5-story multifamily building because the development was inconsistent with the comprehensive plan. Now, this decision was upheld by the Florida Supreme Court in May of 2002. So obviously, we don't want to have to go down that road. Nobody wants to sue their city and go to court and things like that. I feel like from what I've seen you present is that you're asking the city to follow the comprehensive plan, to follow the codes. Those are the things that you're pushing, and I stand with you
There are
on
objectives and policies within those, which
Absolutely.
access, road access.
Road access is definitely one of those. So absolutely, I think if that's one thing, I know Live Local takes a lot of the power from us, but if that's one thing that we can do as a committee or a commission is we can make sure that the comprehensive plan and the code and all of those things we've talked about, setbacks, road access, that those are upheld and keep staff, keep developers accountable for those things. So thank you so much. I appreciate
agree.
your hard work.
But hopefully you have the insight, because if it's administratively approved prior, but without your input or eyesight or anything, who's to know? Building permits issued, it starts construction, all of a sudden people go, what the heck's going on here? Come to find out, it's been administratively approved in some room buried in
Member
City Hall.
Perez has a question or comment.
I also like to thank you and your co-partner. We've had several different teams that since I've been around. We have a tree team, okay? They were very instrumental in helping the Titusville Environmental Commission and the PNC, I believe, get at least a low-impact development ordinance and the tree ordinance through. Mm-hmm. We couldn't have done it without their help. Okay. Here we have a similar situation. The president's been said there's no reason why we can't, considering the huge task that's in front of us, where we can't have the staff and you all work together to help us craft something that's going to be beneficial to the whole community. Okay, we don't have the staffing to be able to do this on its own. You are a resource that shouldn't be wasted, okay? We need your input, okay? And I would love to see, that collaboration take place. Okay.
In fact, we're going to take up a collection after we're through here and pass the hat.
Oh, I'd be happy to. I'm retired. I can do it. Okay. And there's some others of us within Wendover that have been very involved in a lot of the issues.
Thank
Now,
you.
I do live in Wendover, it is county, but I own several rental properties within the city of Titusville. It's 1 block away from the Searstown Mall, that project. So I'm very involved, in Royal Oak. I've got a house in Royal Oak that's now facing a rezoning activity. So I'm very involved, very interested in what the city of Titusville land development regulations and comprehensive plan policies and objectives contain.
Thank you. Next card, Lori.
Jesse Wright.
Good evening again. Sorry. Jesse Wright, 3461 South Washington Avenue. Governor DeSantis, soon to be President DeSantis, has signed the Bill 102 on March 28th and is going to be effective on July 1st. That's the fact. When I first looked at this, I thought, well, let's look at this from perspective from the public and also from the developer side. And that's where I like to give you that perspective. Looking at it from the public side, you're looking at low income, affordability, and my God, Section 8. Oh my God, I don't want to be near that Section 8. But that's not what this is about, really. We have a shortage of housing, about 6 million nationwide right now. And looking at it from the developer's viewpoint. The world is changing right now, and I know that everyone knows everything is being evolved. I've been here since '73. I'm from Iran originally. I came here to get my engineering degree and go back, and the regime changed and all that. But the point I'm making is this, that as a developer, we're looking at dollars and cents to see if it makes sense to take a portion of the project and allocate it to the affordable housing. And we do need to take a beating on the rents, because as you mentioned, $2,300 a month for a 2-bedroom, I'm projecting in 2027, based on the feasibility in the area, that rent would be about $3,500. So you're correct. That's a difference of about $1,200. But then when you look at the tax incentive, if I can get a second to read that for you, or you know already, if that's okay.
Go ahead.
And that says, the act provides that certain developers will be eligible for a 75% or 100% ad valorem tax exemption, depending on the level of rent restriction for the units. If at least 71 units are affordable to natural persons earning up to 80% of the AMI 2, then each unit provided to such persons qualifies for 100% ad valorem tax exemption. So even though as a developer, we're taking a beating on the rent, even though we're putting affordable housing in a section of the project that we may get a beating because the other tenants are gonna wanna know, why are you doing this? There is some tax incentive that could be offset with the high interest that we have to pay. This isn't 2 years ago, a year ago, even 6 months ago, where I could get 8-9% construction loan. We're up to about 14% with 4 points on top, nearly about 18 to 20%. So we have to evaluate all those things. Can I get just one more minute?
Okay.
So we're talking about rents that are due in about maybe 2 or 3 years. We're not talking about these rents tomorrow, because each development will take about at least 18 months to about 2 years. We're not talking about 2024 even. So these are kind of important. And with that said, I would like to add my project to this as of tomorrow, and I'll be submitting an application. We have 40% of the 240 units. That would be about 96 units. And I believe the people that are going to be coming to the project, they deserve to be in this project. And thank you so much for your time.
Next card.
Tony Schiflo.
Schiflo, Historic Norwood House, Tropic Street. The Live Local Act gives developers enough incentives without the city legislating more incentives favorable to developers, which are harmful and detrimental to the existing neighborhoods they're suggesting to put these projects in. It allows for a county or municipality to excerpt portions from the ad valorem taxes, as Mr. Wright just realized, and wants now to put in an affordable housing down at the old Sears Mall. By golly. Building materials used in a unit within a newly constructed affordable housing development are exempt from sales tax. And this will include all tangible personal property that becomes part of a newly constructed unit in an affordable housing development, including appliances, AC, heater, stove, refrigerator, microwave, maybe. Golly, let's give those poor people a dishwasher. We can get a tax rebate. State and local governments are required to provide incentives to encourage developers. He left. By golly, I would want to too. There's a lot of things wrong with this, and I know Brad's been working hard on it, and I've sent him lots of emails, and I think I don't really understand even what you're here to talk about tonight. Are you here to talk about the 4 pages? I read your agenda packet, and I read the 4 pages that you're here to consider, but I think when it refers to chapter 29, I'm especially interested in chapter 29, which is here because it's Article 10, West Titusville, where the historic Norwood House is. And some of the things in here are really detrimental. I don't have time in 3 minutes to go into it, but I'd be glad to talk to any of y'all about it that would care to talk to me about it, because I have lots of thoughts about West Titusville being annexed to downtown. We're trying to be clumped in with Park Avenue, Main Street, De Leon, and Tropic Street as Category B streets, which allows 15-foot streetscape, which begins at the 35-foot setback with an 8-foot wide sidewalk to be installed to a 7-foot wide tree zone. I'm all for trees. I'm on the tree team. But let me tell you something that I just sent to Brad about. I went out and measured on Tropic Street within the area that we're talking about, West Titusville, between Park and the railroad tracks. And my side of the street is 9 feet, 10 inches from in the right-of-way, in the city's right-of-way, and with a 4-foot sidewalk the entire length. And they're wanting to put 8-foot sidewalks in there. And the other side of the street only has 12-foot right-of-way and the 4-foot sidewalk. And how are we going to get all those things in there when they're going to do away with all setback requirements and things? Like I say, I have lots of objections, but please be very careful is my takeaway, and I want you to hear from a resident and somebody who's really concerned, like these ladies are, but for a different area. You know, this is all over the city. We have to think comprehensively. Please look at everything. Read your packets. Read your packets. Read your packets.
I think this commission does.
Good. I think so too.
Next card.
Lindsay Grizzle.
Say hello. I'm Lindsay Grizzle. I'm in Wendover, and I've just been really impressed with the process. I know that he's taken a beating, and we respect the process, and so if we could be a part of that, that would be helpful also. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next card.
Diane.
You gonna try, Diane?
It's Diane Froeg, and I'm in Wendover as well, Titusville, 32780. And I just want to say thank you, because you let her talk longer, so I'm not going to take your time up. I just want to thank you all for considering everything and taking the time to get this right. And to thank Brad for all his hard work. I know he has been working hard too. And I think we just all need to work together to get it right. Thank you.
Any more cards?
No, sir.
Okay. I'll close the public hearing. Well, I'll say something on this part. It just may shock you. But I keep remembering when we discussed the utility plan for 10 years. And they estimated 10,000 more population by 2035. And you made a remark on that sticks with me all the time. And Kay St. Ange has put together this list of developments and large subdivisions, multifamily, that are proposed or being constructed as of August this year. And you wouldn't believe how many units they are. 6,750 units. And they have an estimated 2 people per unit. That's over 13,500 new residents that we've approved. I don't think we have, according to what we saw, we have the utilities, water, sewer, to back this up. This is not, we're not talking about 10 years, we're talking about probably the majority of them within 2 years. So why should we approve the Live Local Act under these conditions I think we should have a moratorium until we find out exactly where we stand on water and sewer in the city. Because if we keep approving developments, and schools and roads and everything with this amount of units, I'll just pass it down. Let everyone take a look at it. Ms. St. Ange is in the audience, and see what we've done. And I don't know how to approach this. I feel that several comments have been made that maybe we should have, like we did when we discussed the tree ordinance, we had a group representing the tree team, group representing the developers, a group representing the staff, and the attorney involved in it, meet for not that long, maybe 2 weeks, and come up, consolidate all this, the staff's version, and I believe, like Member Moscoso does, and I don't mean this as what it's going to sound like, but you know, there's a difference if you read the King James Version of the Bible. There are different versions. In fact, I've read the Hip Hop Bible. And they're meaning the same thing. But if you read just Melbourne's versus ours, there's a big difference. And I told you that, talked to the planning departments and Cocoa and Rockledge and Cocoa Beach. I've also been in contact with New Smyrna. And none of them see the urgency of doing this right away. I'm not talking about put it off till 6 months. I'm saying we need to take a step back, some kind of step back, whether it be a team of individuals to mold them all together. In the meantime, also find out the difference between the utilities department and the planning department. That's the one thing I'll say.
Mr. Chairman.
Member Charles.
Something just came to me. I don't know. I think, since the city is suing to keep the right to clean water amendment from being adopted, maybe they could sue Florida to put a stay on this law. We can put a lawsuit in and spend our money there, which is I think would be very well spent to fight that instead, to fight this law. Maybe there's some sort of lawsuit that we can do instead, so then we can have a lawsuit. So before we get sued for not implementing, for not allowing some developer to build, we could go ahead and start a lawsuit to stay the law from being implemented, at least here. I don't know. Just saying.
Member Rogers.
I agree with what you said. I do think, but I'm going to, once again, like you said, kind of propose the middle ground. I don't think it has to be done tomorrow, but I do think within 2 weeks would be good. I do think, Brad has a point that, all right, we've only got one on the table right now, but more will be coming. And, they're sort of circling out there like vultures. And, what I read and what we all read again and again, people from these different cities kept making the point, you basically have no control over the zoning, the height, and the density, but you have control over everything else. And they are levers. You can't move whole buildings out of the way with them, but you can move the buildings back some and shrink them some. And what Brad mentioned about, the bigger it gets, the farther back it has to move, and eventually it's, 3 square feet and 1,000 feet high, and it's nobody's going to do it. But there were so many things, little things that I ran across researching, and I'm sure, what I've seen here in this document that these ladies have provided for us, and what I saw myself, there was a lot of help in there. And I think if we can all put that into one hopper and kind of, make some sausage out of it, it's, I just want to give one example here. I talked to the guy in Winter Park, and he said, his note said, cities are getting legal challenges, especially due to the lack of definitions in the law. So even if nothing else was done, adopting definitions for how you read the terms is a good idea for every city. And that is true, of course. Said, the other amazing part is that all a developer needs to do is say verbally that the project will meet the law, but not ever have to provide any proof thereto or face any penalties for non-compliance. There are so many scams out there, I could go on and on. So as someone mentioned earlier, if you kind of, and just some of this other information I had, they wrote into this ordinance, the second purpose of this ordinance is to provide an application and certification process with submittal requirements in order to certify that the proposed housing development does provide such affordable housing as required, submits commitment to do so, and provides such information or reporting requirements during the operation of the housing development. Well, what does that look like? It looks like this. An affidavit confirming a 30-year commitment to provide affordable housing and a monetary cap on all rent charges, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Affidavit attesting to agreement and acceptance as to the annual audit requirements by a certified public accounting firm attesting to the satisfaction of the such income and total rental fees, and violations of such commitments shall be subject to a fine of no less than $5,000 per day for each violation determined by the annual audit, and for each day the annual audit is not received by the city after March 1st of every year. An affidavit agreement that any such fine shall constitute a lien on said property if not paid. I mean, it's got some teeth. I want teeth like that. I want teeth like that. And I just ran across it somewhere. And, and a reference to, like Tampa, I think, is going to get a pass in some areas because they got a major airport. And, we've talked about that. Maybe there are airport requirements. And, I just think that there's a lot of information out there, but people have had some bright ideas, or the observation that this only applies to rental property. I didn't know that. It only applies to rental property.
Multifamily.
What?
Multifamily rental property.
Okay.
Multifamily.
Oh, okay. Well, but it's not any property for purchase, which again, I don't know, that's kind of crummy. I mean, why couldn't somebody who has a lower income like myself, actually buy a house? But anyway, I just think I think we've all collected a lot of information, and I think more of it needs to go into a document with some teeth in it. And I respect Mr. Garad's experience, and he said, I'm quoting, managing development by a memorandum of understanding is ill-advised.
Member Faison.
You all have touched my heart tonight. I'm over here just buzzed with excitement. Thank you all for speaking up for this on this Live Local Act and how much garbage it is. I have intentionally been pushing to make a decision, to make you make a decision, get on the pot or not. And thank you all for at least moving yourselves one way or the other. So thank you. I'm just happy.
We're glad of that. Any other discussion? Member Vice Chairman Aton.
One question, Brad. How does concurrency, as it relates specifically to utilities, water and sewers, relate into this? It still applies?
Yes.
Okay.
So any site plan, any development proposal still has to meet our other code requirements, including comprehensive plan regulation policies and concurrency. If they can't meet it, it can't be approved.
Gotcha. Good answer. Second was more, it seems like, and I fully agree that, that we've got a great team here that's done a lot of good work. What does it look like to try to accomplish what appears to be the consensus up here, that you guys get together, and I definitely think staff's done a great job, and I think there's a lot of things at play here that aren't necessarily talked about, especially as it relates to city's fiscal responsibility to try to not get sued all over the place, and all the legal challenges that could apply if this gets out of hand. So, your staff's got a lot of experience and guidance there. But I think the team of folks here have done a great job. What does it, for us to act on something here, so we're not here till midnight or whatever, because it seems that a consensus is forming, is that a motion? What does that look like to suggest that move forward? I don't.
Whatever you want to do. Member Faison.
Again, I'm gonna take a stab at that. We are all in consensus that we're going to deny tonight's motion and request that the city council assembles a commission for a period of time to write this ordinance. I'm sorry, Chelsea.
Member Rogers.
I'd like to add the stipulation that, our two ladies who put this together be included on that council. And I would also like the opportunity to send a few of the kind of, just document email compilations that I kind of highlighted and said, this is interesting or this is useful. I mean, I think all of us probably have maybe a top 10 list or something that we can send in and say, hey, I didn't think about this, or have you considered this? And chances are they probably have. But, I didn't hear anybody say $5,000 a day plus $5,000 for, violation, and, a lien on the property and, affidavits and stuff. Nobody said that. So I like that idea.
Well, I would just say revise and put together an ordinance with certain revisions, not rewrite the ordinance. Member Moscoso.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to work on the ordinance based off of the memo that Eddie sent. I think that's a really good starting point that we could all agree on.
Well, you can be a P&Z representative on the committee.
Yes, she can. I agree.
You're nominated. Thank you.
Member Rogers, your light is still on. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion?
Can the motion be restated? Because I'm lost.
All right, so the motion is to deny tonight's writing, tonight's ordinance, and we're going to request to council that they authorize or approve a commission to revise the current ordinance.
Made up of citizens?
Yes.
P&Z members, an attorney?
And staff.
And staff.
Yes.
Second, Stan?
Technically, it wasn't an ordinance, it was a memorandum that we were denying.
Well, it's actually an ordinance.
You have an ordinance that's being requested to be approved.
Yeah.
So that's what and a resolution.
Both the ordinance and resolution.
Okay.
Okay. Roll call, please, Lori.
Member
Oh,
Faison?
excuse me. Member Perez, I didn't realize you're...
I'd just like to follow up with Mr. Rogers' comment. So would we send other, resources to Member Moscoso as our PNC representative?
Well,
that sounds good to me.
See, I'd ask to ask you a question. Does that in any way violate the sunshine law?
If we copy city staff on it?
So the proposal will be considered at city council's meeting. They're going to have their follow-up discussion on Tuesday night, and they will obviously hear your request for a committee, I think would be the appropriate term, for this small subject area to be discussed, and it would be subject to the sunshine. So any meetings of that committee would be held in open to the public with minutes kept and noticed for anyone to attend. But all of those members of the committee would also be subject to the Sunshine Law, not allowed to communicate on that topic. And as it would be a subcommittee of this commission, you would not be allowed to communicate to other board members outside of a public meeting.
You could give it a report at every meeting. I would imagine with Thanksgiving and everything, it would be realistically the end of December probably. There'd be a time frame on it. No longer than the end of December. Mr. Rogers.
I bet we could do it faster than that. I mean, you've got several skeletons out there. You just need to kind of put those dry bones together.
I have a comment on that. To assemble a committee will not take that, will take longer than that. I think the earliest you'll see that if council approves that, and then we have to go through staff process to develop this committee, advertise for people to be able to be on it, have council appoint people to be on it. I don't think you're going to see that starting until probably January or February.
Right, because there's also only one meeting in December for city council.
And there's only one meeting in November for us. This one, right. Any other discussion?
Well, I've got a question. So to avoid this irritation of the sunshine laws problems, is there some central funnel person that we all as different individuals can send information to where it can be consolidated and then later approved?
I don't think so.
Chelsea?
The documents will not be able to be discussed amongst you all outside of a public meeting.
I guess what I'm saying is, like, if everything comes in like, like strands in a rope to one point, and
So right now, this board is discussing a motion for whether to deny and establish a commission. And I think we're getting a little bit farther than where that motion was started. So perhaps you want to separate that motion to two different discussion points.
that's an excellent point.
As I recall, the motion that was made stands, and the second one would have to be made as to time frame.
Maybe the motion is we say no to the memo, we say no to the ordinance, that's finished, and then.
Your mic is not on.
I move that we deny.
Wait a minute. Motion has already been made.
Was there a second on that motion?
Yes.
Or not? There was. Okay, thank you.
Roll call, please.
Member Faison?
Yes.
Secretary Grant?
Yes.
Member Perez?
Yes.
Member Moscoso?
Yes.
Member Rogers?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Aton?
Yes.
Chairman Richardson?
Yes. Now, do you want to make a second motion?
I'm just trying to figure out how we do this expeditiously, because I think everyone would like to do it expeditiously and agrees with Brad that it should be done, and probably Chelsea, that it should be done expeditiously. And, I just think that in this room right now, we have all the information and all the people who have the information. I'm just trying to figure out how to put that information together into an acceptable form without, rebuilding Congress.
Vice Chairman Aton.
Can we ask staff? You see where this is headed, and I think a lot in the feedback from the group was the memorandum got a long way toward where we want the ordinance to go. What is the suggested expeditious way to do that? Because the noticing and the committee and the count scares the crap out of me from this timing standpoint, because you clearly have things that are moving fast that you want direction on and need some tools in the toolbox to work with, and we want to support that. So I think we're all rowing in the same direction. We may not be as in time as we need to be, but do you have any suggestions?
There's really only two options. Either you ask for a committee or you make suggestions yourself. Because the only outside of that, it's staff receiving comments from everyone in the public, which we have, and we've considered them. Some of them we think they're valid, probably consider and add them to the, and would strengthen the ordinance. But I don't think that what I've seen so far, which we would recommend approving the bulk of it. So if you want to have, I could consider this, if you want to ask council to table this, to continue this, to have another revision of this with some comments that you want to suggest now. Council will certainly has heard some or received some of these suggestions from Ms. Milton already. And if anybody else wants to do that, council will ultimately have to make a decision. But maybe you could consider asking them to delay this further so that there could be more consideration of it. Otherwise, the other alternative, what you're suggesting in your previous motion, that's going to take a lot of time, only because of the administrative requirements and the sunshine requirements. Outside of that, it's really staff taking people's comments and bringing that before this commission or the city council with versions.
Member Faison.
So the issue now with Member Rogers, or if I'm not mistaken, is that currently there are notes that are in the room today that Member Rogers would like to have those notes available for the committee when they meet.
That's correct.
So is it possible to take those documents that we currently have today and make them an appendix or an appendices to today's meeting? And that way, this is historical, and this can go forward for when the committee meets. These notes are there, and it's collected into one location.
Are you suggesting what has been provided to us today be forwarded over to city council in addition to the agenda we see here?
Correct. So the notes that were written from these ladies here,
Okay.
and the notes that Mr. Rogers here has, and any notes that anybody wants to submit for future consideration for the committee to be able to review.
So stay with the committee. What'd you say?
Stay with the committee,
Okay.
but take these documents and make sure that they're preserved so the committee has them for reference.
Well, they're already the public record.
Yes, but
we
Mr.
have them.
Rogers is.
No, I've got like something on my laptop, which I just kind of like, I pulled pieces from here and said, and commented on it, that kind of thing. It's like 15 pages of, my comments and just like chunks of text pulled out and saying, hey, did we think about this?
Well, let me just tell you that that's, right now, what we have is an agenda item, what you see here tonight, going before city council with the memorandum as an alternative. So if the request to them is what we requested to you tonight. Consider adopting the ordinance with the resolution so that we have a better framework than just the law itself to go forward with a review of something. If they don't accept it, then what we have is the memorandum that we're going to have to utilize. That's what we're going to utilize for administrative review. Now, if you have a different direction you'd like to give city council for them to consider on Tuesday, that's different than what you already made a motion on and approved, which is the committee. That's what you need to consider. You need to get, your role is to give a recommendation to city council on what's being presented to you.
All right, so is it, then this goes to Chelsea. So then Chelsea, is it okay, since Mr. Rogers has shared his notes with us, with all of us here now today, that he email those notes to each of us that are here tonight, that are on the council,
After this meeting?
after this meeting?
Yeah.
Well, because we've already discussed it, so it's something that he's already shared. It's something outside of the scope of what he's already spoke on. So that way, any member from the P&Z that is a part of that committee, they can take these notes with them.
But this will come back to you. I'm sorry. It'll come back to you again. So if anything is to be shared with you, we can certainly receive that information and we can distribute that to the commission.
Right.
But, Chelsea would better answer that.
Rogers, what format do you have this information in?
I've got an email,
Is it in one document?
It's one document.
Did you prepare it yourself?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I did. I mean, I'm sorry, but like a lot of it is like a chunk of Tampa's ordinance and a chunk of Winter Park's, a bunch of chunks of most of Winter Park's ordinance, and some from Miami-Dade, and like my little comments like, oh, this is interesting, or have we considered this, or they're just it's just from public sources, and the city planner of Winter Park saying there's the potential for abuse, stuff like that.
I'm trying to think of how to avoid the sunshine law with that, because
I mean, I don't mind making it public, as public as it, you know. I mean,
No, it
it's-
would become
It's so
public.
boring, nobody's gonna look at it except
Why
these
don't
two
you
ladies.
just
Can you
send
email
it
it
to
to me
you.
right now?
What?
Send it to you.
Can you email it to me right now?
Maybe. Let me try.
Because I could print it out and hand it out to the board members, and that would be like you bringing it and sharing it with other board members,
Oh,
and that
okay.
would be acceptable, because then members of the public would be able to view it. And that's what the Sunshine Law aims to protect, is that if someone here wanted to see what you're presenting,
Right.
we'd need a hard copy.
While he's in the process of emailing that, Vice Chairman Aton.
So, one question that I should know the answer to that I don't. Did the motion include the committee, or was the motion to deny? So the motion we approved included.
This is what I was trying to avoid.
So,
So the motion was both to deny and to request that council consider creating a committee. So on Tuesday night, city council has this agenda item where they will discuss the Live Local Act, and they'll hear your new suggestion that they hadn't heard before, and they will deliberate whether or not to create a committee. And as Brad has indicated, there's an administrative process to establish a committee. It won't be done overnight, as much as we wish we could do that. And I agree with him that it probably would take at least until January to get that committee together, forming concrete discussion items.
This is why I was trying not to vote.
And then, but on the flip side to that, if Member Rogers and Ms. Milton and any other members of the board wanted to send their specific suggestions to modify the ordinance to staff, Brad, then he could incorporate your suggestions into the staff review of if this is, of course, if council doesn't approve it on Tuesday.
Right. Just to add on to that, so on Tuesday night's meeting, they may take all this other information and ask us, if they take your request to continue this, to come back to them with another version of the ordinance based on everybody's input. That's possible.
Member Moscoso, you had your light on, then it came off.
Sorry, I was just thinking, I'm not trying to get in the weeds, but if we do form a committee and say there's one person on it, I mean, I think the idea would be for everyone to be able to funnel their information to a member of staff, and then from staff would be able to funnel that to me, where I wouldn't know who gave what suggestions, things like that. And so I feel like that would be the way that would work. And so it would go to you guys first, and then whoever's representing the P&Z, and that way we're not violating the Sunshine Law.
Yes.
So I actually had a second part, if I can still have that.
Okay.
So this, and the memorandum part, you made a comment that this was accompanying the ordinance so that council could consider the comments in the memorandum, whether they want to go with the ordinance or this, or incorporate some of this, or what's the process there?
So when we, because of council's direction last time that they did not want to go forward with the ordinance, we believe that in the event the ordinance is not adopted, that we would need to have some kind of administrative interpretation in place that we can utilize. That's what that is.
Okay, so this potentially gets approved instead of the ordinance.
Correct. If council doesn't approve that, we still have their August 22nd support for our suggestions at that time.
it's
We'll
like
utilize that.
Interim ordinance, for lack of a better term.
But basically, that's a memorandum between our department and the city manager telling them, this is how we're going to apply this.
Okay.
So it doesn't necessarily need the city council's approval. It's a suggestion that this is how we're going to go forward. Do they support it?
It's like a backup plan if there's no ordinance.
Gotcha. So
Okay.
my question is, because this, how cast in stone is this, in that if you've heard things from us and from these folks tonight that could answer some of their things and craft this a little bit more before next week's meeting, is that doable, or this is already kind of cast and noticed and all that stuff?
Council's agenda will be published tomorrow morning, so it's really late for us to make changes to that. However, it is a memorandum, so it's between me and the city manager. So it can be tweaked. I'd love to beef it up with more information. We're still exploring alternatives, monitoring requirements, how we're going to deal with that. So that might be a different memorandum to how we're going to deal with that issue. So this is
So
just
this is
a work.
a little bit of a living, breathing thing. If in
Correct.
3 weeks from now, this got amended, expanded, whatever, to incorporate more comments.
Yeah.
Yeah. and-
But we have to be clear, though, if it's a regulation, if it's a standard we're trying to adopt,
It has to go in.
that's something you typically do with an ordinance. Now, we made the call with selecting the R2 zoning district as a multifamily standard that we're going to use and apply, mainly because City Council said that on August 22nd, but it wasn't an adoption of an ordinance. That's why we suggested the ordinance, so that it's something, a force of law that we can back up.
And it should read more like the Living Bible rather than the King James Version,
I don't
which
know. I
that
think the
ordinance did.
hip hop.
Any other discussion? Okay. Are we through with that item?
I think there's a comment from Ms. Milton.
Okay.
One big concern that I have about just going with the memorandum and you not putting a stop to it is, I mentioned it before, is who is the administrative approver? And what is the process of that administrative approval? And with the Bristol project already in the hopper, what is that within the city of Titusville? I don't think we really want to fall back on, what we've done in the past for everything else, because this isn't everything else. This is a major deal. So,
And I think it would behoove us, as many as possible, to be at council meeting next Tuesday night. Okay, any discussion? Okay, next item is petitions and requests from the public present. Okay, okay.
Tony Schifolo, 715 Tropic Street. I didn't mean to cast aspersions on this board when I said read your packet, but this is going to be my mantra to all the advisory boards. We need to pay special attention. I myself am on the little old Historic Preservation Board, which doesn't do much, but we do a lot that matters. And we don't have great big agenda packets, but we do read and discuss. And I've noticed that some of the meetings that I go to, because I go to all of them, the TEC, the P&Z, the Board of Adjustments.
You're like me, you don't have a life.
I don't have a life. This is my life. This is, be careful. I'm also working up a performance piece about it, so watch for me on Broadway. You thought Hamilton was something. Wait till you hear about Titusville. My point is that there's a lot happening, and I'm very confused about the ordinance that Brad is talking about presenting to City Council to pass, because what I'm looking at is a document from, I'm especially considering Chapter 29 in what I think is the vision for tomorrow, or vision for Titusville, and all the changes they're suggesting to make to the comprehensive plan. And so it's one rabbit hole after another. The comprehensive plan, the 2040 plan, the TEC suggestions. Oh my gosh, over here we got the Indian River Lagoon and all the cities suing us and trying to raise money to pay our lawyer and paying my taxes so that the city can sue me and use my money to sue me. You know, that kind of thing. So I think it's very complicated, it's very complex, and everybody else has a life but you and me to do other things. But I suggest that your other lives aren't going to be very valuable or very worthwhile if things change drastically in the direction that I see them heading in this town, with the almost 7,000 units being built and the sewer not able to handle it now because there's always all these spills, and then people going out to make collections of, to make measurements, which is all we've been asking them to do, and getting arrested and thrown in jail. You know, things are getting really serious in this town. And so as a member of the Historic Preservation Board, I'm dedicated to not only reading my agenda packets, but even the 700, 800, 900 pages of the City Council, you know? So I just want us to be aware, look at the gestalt, look at the whole picture, and see how your advice goes into helping us keep the whole city going in the direction we all want. Thank you.
Any other petitions and requests from the public? Okay. City staff report.
We don't have any reports.
City attorney. No report from me. I think I've said enough. Members? Yes.
I just wanted to report that I don't know if everyone knew that Brevard Public Schools was selling with Spring Hills Education Center, but that is now a done deal. It has been sold, and that's 10.19 acres, and it closed on 10/19. So,
Much as I hate to ask, who they sell it to?
from the information that I have, because it's not on the public record yet, like I can't find it on the tax site or anything. It says 800 Land Avenue LLC, which from my research is just someone in Jackson, Wyoming, known for doing senior living communities, I believe.
It's Whispering Hills Elementary, which has been closed for years. It's on South Street.
No, South Street and Lane.
Right behind
Not far
the
from
former
here.
Parkway Junior High. Yeah.
Right.
Oh, yeah, there's not there anymore.
So, I mean, the building is, was in disrepair. Excuse me? Yeah, it was about 1.6 million. And it was advertised as a multifamily development opportunity, so you can pretty much guarantee that it's probably gonna come in front of us in the near future for rezoning. So I just wanted to make everyone
Probably
aware.
live local.
Well, probably I know where that property is very well. And it's sold for 1.6 million?
Yes. About.
Just in case y'all don't know, Wyoming is one of those easiest places to create an LLC. Just
Any other members? This meeting is adjourned at 9:44.